Good morning from Westminster on the day that Gordon Brown takes over. We'll have live coverage throughout the day as the Chancellor becomes Prime Minister after waiting for a decade. And there's good news for Mr Brown already. A Sky News poll suggests he's closing the gap on the Conservatives. Meanwhile, Tony Blair shows no sign of leaving the limelight. He's expected to confirm he'll become a Middle East envoy and resign as an MP.
And we're live here also at Buckingham Palace for one of the most fundamental pieces of the British Constitution as the Queen oversees the handover of power.
As the new head of government leaves, carrying the powers of office that the monarch has just bestowed, traditionally the equerry is the first to say, "Congratulations, Prime Minister."
We'll be showing you exactly what happens behind the palace doors as Gordon Brown receives the trappings of power. We'll follow both men every step of the way from Downing Street to the House of Commons for Blair's last PMQs and also along the Mall to Buckingham Palace.
Also in the news today, holding back the floodwaters. Work continues on the Ali Reservoir as another drowned body is discovered. And back for more. Penman prepares for round 2 at Wimbledon.
This is Sky News with Julie Etchingham, Kay Burley and Martin Stanford.
Well, good morning from Westminster. Today, Britain will get a new Prime Minister. After more than a decade in charge, Tony Blair will become plain old Mr Blair, and his long-standing next-door neighbour, Gordon Brown, will move to the top job. And there's good news today for Gordon Brown as he prepares to take office. A Sky News poll suggests Labour and the Tories are now virtually neck and neck in the polls, with a noticeable bounce for Labour since Gordon Brown took over as party leader. Our political correspondent, Joey Jones, has the details.
The bandwagon is rolling. The keys to Downing Street are in his grasp. Yesterday, a senior Tory joined the Brown Revolution. And now, a Sky News poll confirms the incoming Prime Minister has the Conservatives in his sights. Our poll shows the Conservatives under David Cameron on 37%. Labour under Gordon Brown now right up, snapping at their heels on 36%. Min Campbell's Liberal Democrats still in the doldrums on 12%. Now, the good news for Gordon Brown is that this represents an upward swing of 4.5 percentage points in just 3 months.
On these figures, given Britain's political geography, Labour would be easily the largest party in a new House of Commons and not far short of an overall majority. If you look at the last 50 years, successful oppositions, the ones that have gone on to win the next general election, have at some point in mid-term been around 50, 52, 55%. David Cameron is way off that. So if I were David Cameron, I'd be pretty worried at the moment.
And our poll suggests Tory tactics are misfiring. In recent weeks, David Cameron's chief lieutenants have argued they are best placed to maintain Tony Blair's agenda of reform in the public sector. But if our poll is anything to go by, being heir to Blair isn't all it's cracked up to be. Of those polled, a whopping 45% said being heir to Blair is a bad thing for a politician. Only 14% thought it would be a good thing. Gordon Brown, by contrast, has emphasised the need for a new style of politics, and the poll indicates in some respects the public buys into it. Head-to-head, once again the results look good for Gordon Brown. He ranks higher than his Tory rival on trust, on leadership, on running the NHS, the economy, and on education policy. Crumbs of comfort for David Cameron? Well, he is ahead on charisma, and he holds a narrow lead on foreign policy and the environment.
Charisma alone doesn't win an election. And if I were David Cameron, I would concentrate above all on getting ahead of Gordon Brown on trust. Remember, it was people's distrust of Tony Blair that cost Labour dear at the last election. And Gordon Brown seems to be winning back the voters' trust.
No question, these numbers will go down well with the Labour High Command. And if David Cameron doesn't turn things round soon, who knows? Gordon Brown might fancy that snap election after all. Joey Jones, Sky News, Westminster.
Well, let's cross live now to our political editor, Adam Bolton, who's in Downing Street this morning. And the removal men there, it's a good day for business if you're Tony Morris Shipping, apparently, I've just been told. Their van's been in Downing Street this morning, Adam.
Yes, absolutely. Couldn't get a better advert than this. Worldwide relocation, courtesy of that particular company. At least they've scrubbed up the van, I can see, Julie, especially for the event. Of course, Mr. Blair and his family have been moving stuff out of Downing Street for some weeks now. We've seen vehicles more usually at the back of the building, and the Blairs have now spent their last night under the roof of number 10. They will be going later on today to Marabella, their house in the Sedgefield constituency, where Mr. Blair is expected to announce he's resigning as an MP with a by-election in that seat towards the end of July, just about 4 weeks away. And then after a few days at Chequers, it will be on to Connaught Square in the Marble Arch area of London for the beginning of Mr. Blair's new life, although we're also expecting him to spend a lot of time in America. And with this Middle East job, he will have offices in Jerusalem and quite possibly on the West Bank as well.
Let's look ahead to Prime Minister's questions, his last task before he goes to see the Queen, of course, Adam. Presumably we could expect quite a lot of fun in this session today, but also some pointed questions as to what happens when his next-door neighbour takes over.
Yeah, I think David Cameron will pretty much let Tony Blair get away with it from his own point of view. But of course, in praising or allowing praise of Tony Blair, he will also be seeking to bury the man coming in, Gordon Brown. There's no doubt that that is where David Cameron, ever since he took over the Tory party, has seen the important fight as being. Although it has to be said, in the last few months, things haven't necessarily gone all David Cameron's way. And with that defection yesterday of Quentin Davis, the senior backbencher, although, let's face it, hardly a household name, it puts David Cameron on the defensive rather than ready with a bucket of something nasty to tip over Gordon Brown's head as he steps through the Downing Street door.
Perhaps we should reflect too, Adam, on some of the coverage that the Blair years have had in the newspapers this morning, not least this interview that The Sun got with President Bush. So I was just going to go through a few of the quotes that were taken from that interview with The Sun this morning and get your thoughts on them, Adam. He says of their relationship, "I've heard he's been called Bush's poodle. He's bigger than that." He doesn't mention any other dogs in that line, of course. He goes on to say that Tony's great skill, and I wish I had it, is that he's very articulate. I wish I was a better speaker. And on Gordon Brown, he says, Gordon came here and he wasn't the image of the dour Scotsman at all. And it'll be that relationship between Britain and America and how that might alter on its axis slightly that will be a point of fascination for many in the coming weeks, Adam.
Yeah, I think it will be, and you know, the closeness of this relationship between Blair and Bush really has puzzled many people because most British people don't find George W. Bush a particularly sympathetic person. But I have to say, having seen them together, I think on probably more than a dozen occasions over the last 7 years, there's no doubt about it that they do hit it off. There's no doubt that George W. Bush is behind this idea of giving Tony Blair a role in the Middle East, although it is something that Mr. Blair has publicly said he wanted, because he believes sorting that out is the key to bringing a settlement really with Islam across the world. And what is interesting, I think, is that I do not get the sense that Gordon Brown is going to attempt to distance himself at all from George W. Bush. Of course, Mr. Bush will be gone by the end of next year, but I suspect probably before the summer break we will see Gordon Brown in Washington wanting to talk to Bush and really underlining that kind of Atlanticist bond, which I have to say ever since Margaret Thatcher has been absolutely key to all British Prime Ministers, going through John Major to Tony Blair and now Gordon Brown.
And it's difficult to sort of overstate how big a day this is for Gordon Brown. Few politicians kind of been waiting so desperately for such a desperately long time.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that, you know, is perhaps not commented on is everything that's happening today. The hundreds of reporters here, Tony Blair going, Gordon Brown coming in, is all down to the force of will of Gordon Brown, of his determination to become Labour Prime Minister, to succeed Tony Blair. We don't know, and he denies it, of course, whether he had any involvement in that coup last September, attempted coup as we called it then, against Tony Blair, but there's no doubt that forced Mr. Blair to name the day. Now Gordon Brown, again by force of will and his abilities, has persuaded MPs to nominate him without any competition at all, and he's getting the full job now in number 10. I mean, that shows what a powerful politician he is, but also what a powerful spirit Gordon Brown has, that basically his determination has completely changed the political weather in Britain.
OK, Adam, thank you very much indeed for that. And we know, of course, that the Prime Minister due to leave Downing Street at 11:30 to make his way to Prime Minister's questions.
Julie, thanks very much indeed. Yep, today is the day he's been waiting 10 years to take over power, and he's going to be doing it round about 1:30, 2 o'clock this afternoon. Talking about Mr. Brown, of course, he will have to wait until then. The final Prime Minister's questions at noon today. You can see it live here on Sky News. Interesting to hear what some of the backbenchers will be saying to the Prime Minister today. From next week, it'll be Mr. Brown's turn. But the Prime Minister heading down to see the Queen probably around about 1 o'clock this afternoon for the very last time as Prime Minister. Let's take you through exactly what will be happening later on today. Tony Blair will leave Downing Street for the House of Commons around about 11:30 this morning. He'll take his last Prime Minister's questions times at midday or thereabouts. After that, Mr. Blair will return to Downing Street for the very last time. About an hour later, he's expected to finally leave number 10 for the short journey to Buckingham Palace. At a meeting with the Queen, Mr. Blair will formally offer his resignation as Prime Minister. He'll then leave the palace, possibly for his Sedgefield constituency, where he's expected to announce he's also quitting as an MP after 24 years. Once Mr. Blair has left, Gordon Brown will head to the palace, where the Queen will formally ask him to head a new government on her behalf, of course. Mr. Brown will finally enter 10 Downing Street during the afternoon as Britain's new Prime Minister. Just a little sidebar to what's happening as far as question time is concerned. Peter Morgan, do you remember him? If I tell you he was the writer of The Queen, that fantastic movie many of you, I'm sure, have already seen, he's going to go and watch the final Prime Minister's questions this afternoon from the public gallery. Perhaps there's another movie in the offing, who knows? Stay tuned to Sky News and find out. But for now, I want to tell you exactly what happens when we go inside the palace. The Prime Minister, the very last time, he's referred to as the Prime Minister when he gets there. He's Mr. Blair when he comes out. For everything that happens in between, let's hear from our royal commentator, Alistair Bruce.
The powers of Prime Minister are passed from one person to the other through the Queen as head of state in a simple but symbolic process. Tony Blair will leave Downing Street for the last time as Britain's Prime Minister. Police will sweep him up the road to Buckingham Palace to see the Queen for the final time using the official car. The convoy goes in through the North Centre Gate and then straight into the Central Quadrangle and up to the King's Door. Here the Queen's equerry, Commander Heber Ackland, will be waiting for him with the words, "Welcome, Prime Minister." Once inside, he will go up the King's staircase to the principal corridor. Meanwhile, his private secretary will sit with the Queen's private secretary in another room. The equerry escorts Tony Blair along the corridor to the private audience chamber, where the Queen waits inside. The equerry will then knock on the door, enter, bow, and use the words, "The Prime Minister, Your Majesty." This will be the last time he will ever be referred to as Prime Minister. In private, the monarch will then thank him for 10 years as her Prime Minister, and then ask formally for advice as to who should be called next. Constitutionally, we all know who that will be, but at the moment he gives the name of Gordon Brown, and the Queen accepts, Tony Blair ceases to be Prime Minister. After exchanging a few pleasantries, the Queen will press the bell, thus signalling to the equerry to open the door, and the audience is at an end. Now, traditionally, the equerry will refer to Britain's former Prime Minister as plain Mr. Blair, thus signalling that his term of office is over. Once Tony Blair's car has left the palace and gone to a new destination with less police and fewer advisors, a brief period of time elapses before the Queen's private secretary rings Gordon Brown to invite him for an audience with the Queen. With the handover so well anticipated, much of this may already have been planned, but formalities will still be observed. Gordon Brown knows his fate, but only the Queen can make him her Prime Minister. This time, the equerry will say, "Mr. Brown, Your Majesty." During a private conversation, the Queen invites Gordon Brown to form her government. The moment he says yes, he becomes Prime Minister. Tony Blair will have handed over the formal seals of office as First Lord of the Treasury, which is the Prime Minister's other formal title. If so, the Queen will hand these to Gordon Brown, her new Prime Minister. When the audience is over, the Queen presses the bell. As the new head of government leaves, carrying the powers of office that the monarch has just bestowed, traditionally the equerry is the first to say, "Congratulations, Prime Minister." The new Prime Minister travels straight to 10 Downing Street and will be surrounded by all the trappings of power the Queen has given him.
And you can see most of that live here on Sky News from midday today. Some breaking news actually just reaching us here at Sky. Let me tell you about the Irish Prime Minister, Bertie Ahern. Apparently he's been chatting on the telephone with Tony Blair, and he says that Mr. Blair has confirmed to him, at least, that he will be the new Middle East peace envoy. That hasn't been officially confirmed at this stage, but if that was to be the case, then certainly he would be resigning as an MP, which suggests that he will go up to Sedgefield later on today in order to tell his constituents that's what he plans to do. Perhaps that's where he will make that announcement, but certainly the Irish PM has been quoted as saying that he's had a chat on the phone, and as far as he's concerned, Mr. Blair has confirmed to him that he will be the new Middle East peace envoy. As soon as we get more confirmation on that, we'll bring it to you here at Sky News, and of course we'll be bringing you all the toings and froings through those gates today as the Prime Minister Blair goes in and Prime Minister Brown comes out. Do you know how many Prime Ministers we've had under this Queen? News at sky.com, let us know. Julie.
Kay's going to be posing all those little teasers, of course, throughout the day. Let's then catch up with our top stories then this morning. In a Sky News survey shows it will be a close contest between the two major political parties if an election was called now. Our poll shows the Conservatives under David Cameron on 37%. Labour under Gordon Brown have risen to 36%. Tony Blair is expected to confirm his plans to become a Middle East peace envoy after he steps down as Prime Minister. He'll be meeting the Queen at lunchtime. And in other news today, the body of a man has been recovered in Worcestershire. He's the fourth known victim of the floods. Engineers are continuing to pump water out of the Ali Reservoir in Rotherham. They say there's still a risk the dam could burst.
Let's get the latest information on that. Let's take you to the area around the dam. Darren Little reporting live for Sky News this morning. Darren?
Hello, Martin. Well, as you can see, the dam is still intact, mainly because overnight, lorry after lorry of hardcore has been brought here to plug that enormous gap that we saw so vividly from the Skycopter yesterday, which opened up in the front of that dam wall. Now, they keep coming, so my presumption is that they're not only just plugging that gap, but they're actually doing an awful lot more to try and shore up the entire wall there to make sure it doesn't go. Overnight, the situation has been downgraded from critical to still dangerous, but don't let that make you think that there is no danger here. The M1 is still closed through this stretch that follows the valley down here from the Ali Reservoir, and you can imagine there is enormous pressure to open what is such a major route. But nevertheless, this morning it is still closed just in case that dam bursts, because that still is a possibility, although it is lessening.
Darren, thank you. A youth has been stabbed to death in North London, the third killing involving a teenager on the capital street since the weekend. Police were called to reports of a disturbance involving a group of youths at the junction of Tollington Way and Axminster Road in Islington. The victim, a white youth in his mid-teens who's not been named, was pronounced dead at the scene. An 11-year-old boy killed in a freak accident when a tree branch fell on him during an adventure holiday has been named as Daniel Mullinger. He was killed yesterday during a school trip in the grounds of Felbrigg Hall near Cromer in Norfolk while taking part in an outdoor activity course run by his primary school. Another 11-year-old boy who suffered pelvis and internal injuries in the incident is a critical but stable condition. Millions of people could be prescribed cholesterol-cutting drugs called statins under guidelines published today by the government's clinical watchdog, NICE. GPs will be told to draw up a systematic strategy to identify which patients on their books are most at risk of developing heart problems. And the NICE guidelines say people who are found to have a 20% or greater chance of developing cardiovascular disease over the next decade should then be prescribed statins to try to reduce their cholesterol.
Well, of course, in the short term, this always costs money. It costs money to do this, it costs money to treat people. But in the long term, the economists will tell you that it saves money to the health service because you don't have people with the consequences of an early heart attack or an early stroke who are then a burden on the NHS for maybe 20 or 30 years.
Thousands of teenagers are putting their health at risk by binge drinking at least once a week. That's according to a survey by the Trading Standards Institute, which shows that of 12,000 14 to 17-year-olds surveyed, nearly half drank at least once weekly. Some teenagers are knocking back 5 or more units at once. And just over half of regular drinkers said they had been violent when drinking. Most children sample their first taste of alcohol between age 8 and 12, usually at home with their parents. Doctors are debating today whether to make it easier for women to have abortions. A motion being discussed at the British Medical Association annual conference calls for a ban on the current requirement for 2 doctors to sign the consent form. Midwives and nurses could also perform abortions if the motion is passed. The proposals have angered anti-abortion groups. Police investigating the deaths of a pro wrestler and his family in the United States say it appears to be a case of murder-suicide. Chris Benoit, known as the Canadian Crippler, failed to turn up at 2 live events, telling organisers it was due to an undisclosed family emergency. He's suspected to have killed his wife and his 7-year-old son before taking his own life.
This is Sky News on our website, sky.com/news. What would you like to say to Gordon Brown? Join in the discussion online. Also coming up, I'll be asking, is Brown good for Britain, with a couple of MPs here at Westminster? That's coming up in a few moments' time. And fighting talk, how Ricky Hatton's war of words may have just landed him a prize fight.
In the old days, if you fancied watching something half decent, you had to sit down when the newspaper told you. Then Sky Plus bowled into your life and that all changed. Now you watched quality stuff whenever you felt like it. Fast forward to 2007 and you clocked this thing called Anytime on your TV guide. Get in, you chirp. See, Anytime brings you a tasty bunch of shows via Sky Plus and HD that you might just want to discover. Sky Anytime, your Sky on demand.
Hi, I'm Dawn, a product advisor at Holland & Barrett, and here's why our £4.99 super sale makes Holland & Barrett the place to be this summer. You can save an amazing £5 on our 1 litre cranberry aloe vera juice, now only £4.99. And there's a massive £14 off 1000mg EPA fish oil, now only £4.99. And thanks to our excellent training academy, we can help you out with good advice on any of our products. So hurry on down to Holland & Barrett, the £4.99 super sale is now on.
Still looking for cheaper car insurance? Not anymore. Hastings Direct has conquered the cost of car insurance, being named cheapest provider for 3 years running.
So, for cheaper car insurance, call 0800 00 1066.
Hastings Direct's UK-based call centres could save you up to £236, or go online. See how much you could save on your car or motorcycle insurance. Call 0800 00 1066 or visit hastingsdirect.com, hastingsdirect.com.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are getting ready to land.
Within the miles.
Please return to your seat and make sure your carry-on bags are stored in the overhead
between us. Away with the sea.
Air France.
We all have a credit report. Yours could determine whether you get a yes or no when applying for credit and the rate of interest you pay. So if you're looking for a mortgage or home improvement loan, a new car, credit card or mobile phone, will the answer be yes or no? Credit Expert from Experian lets you access your credit report online, helping you get the yes you want. Take control of your credit history today. Visit creditexpert.co.uk now for your free 30-day trial.
Thinking new perspectives with Credit Suisse, sponsors of the Financial Report. Credit Suisse, sponsors of the Financial Report.
Morning, let's check on the sport this hour, and no rest today for Tim Henman. He's back on centre court at Wimbledon for the third day running for a second round match against the big serving Spaniard, Feliciano Lopez. That follows his epic victory against another Spanish player, Carlos Moya, spread over the first 2 days that ended with that 13-11 final set victory. Lopez next, age 25. He's 7 years younger than Tim, and he got to the quarter-finals at Wimbledon 2 years ago. But Tim thinks that the tough test yesterday will stand him in pretty good order.
It is a different type of match playing a lefty, but Moya serve and volley definitely more than I felt he was going to, and he served phenomenally well, served so consistently and very heavy. And Lopez is going to be looking for the same type of thing, same strategy.
Well, Henman, of course, 4 times a Wimbledon semi-finalist, the last time back 5 years ago, 2002, so his fans will pack Henman Hill again today, living the dream. And among the throng, this guy's Jackie Beltrao. Jackie.
It's day 3 of a very chilly Wimbledon, and I'm with the Cures. And guess who you're supporting?
I'm supporting Tim Henman.
A shot in the dark that was.
Yes.
Could you believe how well he played?
It was amazing. Everyone expected it to be over in 5 or 10 minutes, but over an hour's play of thrilling tennis was fantastic.
Can he win again today, do you think?
Very much hope so. Yes, yeah.
We're
Fingers
that,
crossed.
aren't we? Or are we? We've got no nails left. What about you guys? All dressed in orange. You're Dutch, obviously. Who have you come to support?
We're going to support Michaela Krajicek, the female, the sister of Richard Krajicek, the winner.
Won here.
Absolutely, yeah.
And now I've heard a funny story about you guys because you've queued all night to get outside court tickets, which you could have just walked up and got just now without the tent thing.
No, the atmosphere is great. See all the people, and we're just doing this the whole week. And it spares money, of course.
And what about you? I'm going to say Tim.
Yes, we're going on centre. We're going to give him his best cheer we can today, and just hopefully he does the business again and moves on.
So there you go. I haven't seen this for ages. It's Henmania back with a vengeance. I just hope he does it again today. Back to you.
Thanks, Jackie. Back live with Jackie a bit later on this morning. There's the order of play. Third seed Andy Roddick first on against Danai Udomchoke of Thailand. Justine Henin against the Russian Dujevina. Then it's Tim Henman's game. Hopefully the weather will hold off long enough for that to get through today. On court 1, Serena Williams, twice winner, plays Alicia Molik of Austria. Roger Federer, the favourite men's champion, against Del Potro. And scheduled third, Marat Safin against Pakistan's Aizam ul Haq Qureshi. More on that for you later. Away from tennis, Ricky Hatton's baiting of the American fighter Floyd Mayweather appears to have worked after his 4th round stoppage of Jose Luis Castillo in Vegas at the weekend. Hatton has been taunting Mayweather, calling him to come out of retirement and fight him. The fighter, dubbed the Pretty Boy, has responded, saying he's only too happy to step back into the ring, even saying he's never wanted to hurt an opponent like he does the British world light welterweight champion. Both men are unbeaten. What a fight that would make. Alinghi enters the 4th race of the America's Cup today, badly in need of a win. That's after Team New Zealand won race 3 to take a 2-1 lead over the holders in the best-of-9 series in Valencia. Start was delayed for 2 hours because of shifting winds. When the crews finally got onto the course, the challengers New Zealand took the lead on the downwind 4th leg and never gave it up again. That's it. We'll be back at Wimbledon with Jackie later. Now, Julie.
Chris, thank you very much. Let's just take you live to Downing Street. I think some more signs of the movements going on there in terms of the removals. Out they come, those last packing cases, and a busy day for those removal guys indeed. Off to Connaught Square as the Blairs contemplate the next move, and in this last extraordinary 10 years. Bertie Ahern has been reported as saying that Tony Blair has already told him that he's been appointed as Middle East envoy. So how quickly he would be in that post, given that he's also due to head up to Sedgefield to tender his resignation as an MP to his party faithful there. We'll wait and see. But that then the scene live at Downing Street at the moment. Much more for you, of course, on Sky News throughout the day, especially on our website, sky.com/news. For a moment, though, let's just catch up with the weather.
Drizzle. As seen by Qatar Airways passengers. Your 5-star airline.
Over the next day or so, we are going to see quite a few showers. There'll be sunshine at times in between, but a lot of cloud. And then by the weekend, expect to see some heavier bursts of rain again, although they will be a lot more faster moving than the rain we saw earlier on. If we take a look then at the graphics, you can see so this afternoon, the main area of showers will be down in the southeast, where they've travelled from northwest down towards the southeast. However, there will still be some more packing in to the northwest of Scotland. This will mean disruption to play in Wimbledon at the end of the day. But you can see behind it there is brightening skies. There will be brightening skies for the north and west of England and Wales, and of course across Ireland too. Now overnight, expect more showers for Scotland and some more persistent rain into the south and west of Ireland. Meanwhile, I think it'll be generally a dry-ish day through central and eastern parts, at least until the end of the day, as you see that rain starting to roll in. There will, however, be some heavier showers overnight into Friday, more showers and sunshine on Friday afternoon.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
There's more on Sky News on our website, sky.com/news. Hundreds still homeless following record floods. See the latest pictures and video online. Also coming up, has Gordon Brown got what it takes to be PM? We'll debate that issue next. And TV time travel, we go back to the 60s to see how young Gordon started out on the path to power.
Hi, picture. I was calling about a loan. Yes, we do have a mortgage.
Mum, where's my scooter?
Try the garage.
If you've credit cards and loans in different places, call Picture on 0800 064 3900. You could rearrange your credit into one easy, affordable loan so you can keep track of your money.
Tess, where am I? I'm on the phone to Picture. Don't worry, it's always like this here, but at least I can get my credit sorted. We'd like to borrow £25,000.
Mum, I can't find my trainers.
Under the bed. How much a month would that be? Really? Well, that's a lot less than we're paying now. So what do I need to do?
My scooter's not in the garage.
So that's all there is to it. Great. Josh, Dad's found your scooter.
Call Picture Loans on 0800 064 3900 today, because it's nice to know where everything is.
That was great.
What are houses? Houses are bricks and mortar, property. Over time, houses become homes, full of stories and memories. If you're over 55, Norwich Union can help you unlock the equity in your house without having to leave your home. To find out more about the features, costs, risks, and impact on any inheritance you leave, speak to your financial advisor or call Norwich Union on 0800 092 3110 for our free information pack.
Quit smoking, and this is what you're up against. Smoking increases the number of receptors in your brain that thrive on nicotine. Take their supply away, they go mad. They won't let you break the habit without a fight. Nicotine reduces cravings because it contains therapeutic nicotine, so you can wean the beasts off gradually and give your willpower a fighting chance to do the rest. Tame the beasts and quit with nicotine.
Sky Sports this July. England face the West Indies and welcome India for 2 tests. There's top quality golf from Europe and the US Seniors Tour. Speedway's finest gear up for the World Cup. There's darts from the World Match Play in Las Vegas, show jumping from Hickstead, World Match Play Bowls, and the return of Fishermania. July on Sky Sports. For details on how to join in, call 08702 407 726.
Welcome back to Westminster on this historic day when power finally transfers via the monarch, of course, between those two old rivals and close political friends, Tony Blair and Gordon Brown. This then the scene live in Downing Street this morning. They've been taking out the boxes all morning, a busy day for the removal men, and what a day for the Blair family. Not only for the Prime Minister, of course, but his 4 children who've grown up in the limelight of his premiership. Leo Blair, of course, born in Downing Street, or during Prime Minister's time in Downing Street, and a lot of family history too tied up in that building. Here on Abingdon Green, just outside the Palace of Westminster, of course, it's a buzz with what is about to happen today. Scores of journalists here waiting to see what happens. Of course, Prime Minister's questions due at midday. This, the shot from our helicopter. You can just make out there the green in front of the Palace of Westminster. That little encampment there, a protest, as is so usual, against the Iraq War. And many of the families of those who've lost loved ones in the Iraq War have made their way to London today to make their feelings known about the war on this day that the Prime Minister who took this country to war in Iraq stands down. So much more to come from in and around Westminster, of course not least Buckingham Palace, where Tony Blair will travel to tender his resignation to the Queen. Well, Gordon Brown set to become Prime Minister, bringing an end to Tony Blair's 10 years in power. Mr. Blair will see the Queen and leave office after his final Prime Minister's questions session in the House of Commons and saying farewell to his Downing Street staff. Mr. Brown is then expected to travel to meet the Queen, who will formally offer him the role this afternoon. So he'll be the country's new leader, son of a church minister and famous for his financial prudence. But who is James Gordon Brown? Where did he come from and how did he get here? Sky's Scotland correspondent James Matthews has been digging for the new Prime Minister's roots.
The new Prime Minister used to like a pint in here. To understand what made Gordon Brown the man, you need to go back in time. Gordon Brown, the party animal who would be Prime Minister. His image now is nothing like it was back here in 1970s Edinburgh. Here he was the thinker, the drinker and the charmer. It's Gordon Brown before he was famous. Taking a journey through Gordon Brown's past takes a Ford Popular. Gordon Brown doesn't drive these days because he only has the sight of one eye. But he did learn, and when he did, it was in a Ford Popular. It was the family car when he grew up in the town of Kirkcaldy. James Gordon Brown, the middle of 3 sons. His dad was the local minister here at St Bryce-Dale's Church, and he taught young Gordon how to drive in his Ford Pop with its 10 horsepower, 3 gears and pop-out air vents. Off-road, his dad's teachings were in moral compassion and in social responsibility. Lessons from a man of the cloth in helping those least able, now famously known as Gordon Brown's moral compass. At school, the young Gordon was a clever, sporty child. As part of a local experiment, he was fast-tracked through the education system, along with other bright kids. So he finished high school aged 16. It was at high school that Gordon Brown suffered an injury that many say changed him psychologically. He was playing rugby in a staff versus pupils match when he took a knock on the head. That led to a detached retina. He lost the sight in one eye, and he almost lost it in the other eye. It took lengthy periods of pioneering surgery and of lying down in the dark. People who knew him say that nearly losing his sight gave Gordon Brown a new urgency to achieve, to get things done. At the age of 16, Gordon Brown crossed the River Forth for Edinburgh University to study history. And as a student, he soon tasted political success. This was Gordon Brown's entry into politics. The student politician with the flowing locks who became university rector. It was a big deal at the time. And an even bigger deal when he took on senior academics and officials for the right to chair the university court, and won. The university establishment loathed it, the notion that one of this lot, a mere student, could hold a key position on its governing body. Little wonder that the young Gordon Brown was soon being courted by the great and the good in the Labour Party. One day, son, they'll all be yours. Thereafter, for Gordon Brown, there were jobs lecturing in politics at university, researching and producing as a journalist at Scottish television. And it was in 1983 that he finally took the turning for Westminster, becoming the MP for Dunfermline East. And the rest is political history. James Matthews, Sky News, on Gordon Brown's old stomping ground.
So let's fast forward then back here to Westminster. The day has finally arrived when Gordon Brown moves from number 11 to number 10 Downing Street. But how has he performed in that role as Chancellor? What kind of Prime Minister will he be? Well, joining us to discuss this is Chris Grayling from the Shadow Front Bench. Thanks indeed for joining us. I mean, this is a momentous day, isn't it? Whatever viewpoint you take of either Blair or Brown.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, let's be clear. I mean, Tony Blair has been Prime Minister for 10 years. It's one of the longest terms as Prime Minister in our history. You have to give him credit for that. He's also done things that have made a real difference. I mean, you look at the Northern Ireland peace process. I think that's something we should all be grateful to him for. So this is a day where actually some of the party politics is set aside, and I think we should rightly say, goodbye to Tony Blair and acknowledge his achievements, which he's undoubtedly been there.
Now, one of your colleagues rates Gordon Brown's prospects as Prime Minister so highly that he's crossed the floor.
Well, the thing about Quentin Davies, I mean, obviously we regret what's happened, but most fundamentally he disagrees with the changes that David Cameron and his team are bringing in the Conservative Party. He doesn't like the direction in which we're going. Let me give you one example. Quentin disagrees with us over the decision to put the environment at the heart of our policy making, to make climate change a major priority. Now, I happen to disagree with him on that. I think climate change is one of the key issues we face both nationally and globally. I think it's absolutely right that it should be central to what an opposition seeks to do as it prepares for government. Quentin disagrees with that. I'm sorry he does, and he's chosen to go his own way, but that doesn't mean the changes in the Conservative Party are wrong.
But he's perceived and wrote in that extremely scathing letter in Gordon Brown a strong leader, and this is a man who has a strong record in government. I mean, the Tories will be saying this is a man who is associated with Blair for the last 10 years, etc., etc., but in the analysis of his political achievements, that's where many people will point to his trust factor going into number 10.
I think you need to look at the impact that Gordon Brown's had on the government. Yes, he's had some economic successes, but if you look at the challenges we face in the health service, for example, where despite all of the extra money that's been spent, services in the front line are still under threat. I'm spending my time in my own constituency campaigning to save my local maternity department, even despite all the money that's been put into the health service. It was Gordon Brown who started the process of creating the culture of targets that's making it so difficult for our frontline professionals in the health service to do their job properly. And if you look back over 10 years at all the things the government's got wrong, and there have been many of those, the one thing you have in common is Gordon Brown's fingerprints have been at the heart of it. He's been a very hands-on Chancellor. He's been very involved in domestic decision-making. He's been trying to be in control of as much as he can. Gordon Brown is not in a position now to say, I'm the change that Britain needs. He can't be, because he's been so integrally involved with the things that have gone wrong.
But he's stolen the Tories' clothes. It was George Osborne that said, we are the real heirs to Blair. Gordon Brown has moved that way to the margins of politics by saying, in that speech we heard last week, I back academy schools, I back Foundation Hospital. He is the heir to Blair, not the Tories.
Well, George Osborne never actually said that we are the heirs to Blair. What he said was that the government has put in place some building bricks that actually take us back to where we were 10 years ago. If you take the example of how our health service funded, the government scrapped GP fund holding. 10 years later, they're now trying to move power back to our GPs. They realised that we had it right and they got it wrong in their early days in government. So what we're saying is that we want to build on some of the things the government have done. We don't agree with what they've done, and in many cases they've been much too timid in changes to the way the health service works. They've been much too timid. They're not given nearly enough power back to professionals. But there's a germ there that we can build on. What I think people in the health service and the education service don't want is another government that would come in and rip everything up and start again. We want to take a responsible approach to government and build on the things that are good, get rid of the things that are bad.
OK, let's contrast this then. Gordon Brown, and many were predicting, oh, maybe there will be a leadership challenge, it'll be a bumpy ride on this way into number 10. It wasn't. It was an extraordinarily smooth handover. There was not a challenge which emerged, which no doubt the Tories would have loved. Gordon Brown has received this bounce in the polls in the last few weeks. David Cameron, by contrast, has been really lost on some issues like grammar schools, flawed by his own party. And what we see in the image of the pair of them at the moment is here is a man who has now smoothly gone into number 10, despite what has gone on over the last 10 years, and a Tory leader who appears to be on the ropes.
Well, What you've seen in the last few days is a mixture of polls, some suggesting that we're in the lead, some suggesting that the Labour Party is narrow in the lead. We have never underestimated.
Much further ahead at this point,
we've never underestimated Gordon Brown. We've never taken the view that somehow the transition from Tony Blair to Gordon Brown was going to provide us with an open goal to kick a ball into for the next election. But the truth is that after the glitz of today and tomorrow and the next few days, we're expecting a blizzard of initiatives from Gordon Brown to try and catch the headlines, actually in much the same way that Tony Blair did 10 years ago and has been happening on and off ever since. Then it's back to business as usual. And then Gordon Brown's got to demonstrate that he has real solutions to the problems in our health service, the problems in our pension system that's largely of his own creation, the problems of crime and law and order on our streets. And that's where the proof in the pudding will really lie. For the past 10 years, the government's really had no answers to those challenges. I see no reason and nothing in what Gordon Brown is saying now to believe that he's got answers today.
OK, we're edging nearer to Prime Minister's questions at 12. You're looking forward to that? It'll be an amazing session.
I think today will be a very different occasion. It is an occasion to mark Tony Blair's departure. I think to some degree the usual party political repartee of Prime Minister's questions will be set aside today. That's right, Tony Blair's been there 10 years. It's an achievement. We should recognise that. But of course, tomorrow it's business as usual. Tomorrow it's getting back to the real challenges the country faces.
OK, Chris Gretley, thank you very much indeed for joining us on this day. And let's get some reaction from the city to what's going on here in Westminster. Here's Shola.
Thanks very much, Julie. Well, in his 10 years as the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Gordon Brown has been accused of hitting us with higher taxes. But have taxes really gone up? And if so, who are the winners and losers? I'm joined now by Donna Bradshaw. She's an independent financial advisor from the IFG Group. Donna, have we become richer or poorer under Gordon Brown?
Overall, we've become richer, but it's more because of economic factors, and such as we've had low inflation, we've had low interest rates, so people have been able to buy properties and have low mortgage payments. But latterly, what we've seen is actually that inflation has been creeping up, as have interest rates, so people have been feeling poorer. During his term as Chancellor as well, what we found is that initially the tax burden went up, then it went down slightly, and then we've seen it creeping back up again. But I think what most people would accuse him of is actually being very complicated with the tax system.
But recently he's actually simplified it to a certain extent. In his last budget, he announced a lower band of income tax, specifically targeting middle earners. That should be a good thing, shouldn't it?
It sounds like a good thing, and I do like simplification. The only people that really benefit from a very complex tax system are tax consultants, who clearly you need to employ them to sort things out. But overall, what he's done, while he's given with one hand, he's also taken away. So the people in the middle end up very much of a muchness. The people who have really benefited from Gordon Brown's term as Chancellorship are actually the very low paid and pensioners, as well as the very, very rich. What we've seen in this country now is that the very rich have got extremely rich.
Where would you say he's disappointed?
I think overall he's been a very good Chancellor. I think he's a very smart man. But what has been disappointing is that he has tended to make things very, very complicated. But there may be reasons for that. For example, tax credits are not very popular. Not everybody who deserves them is benefiting from them. However, it may be very difficult to find another solution to that without pushing up the top rate of tax, which would be very unpalatable for the British public.
And what about in the area of pensions? Back in 1997, he actually removed the tax breaks for pension funds, which many people have suggested has been part of the reason that so many pension funds have been in deficit.
I think that's just part of the reason. I think it's been overhyped. In fact, I believe Norman Lamont also reduced the tax credit on dividends prior to that. One of the big things that's really hit pension funds was actually earlier this decade, when we had a real slump in the markets, and that had a knock-on effect on pensions. So it wasn't just the taking away of the tax credit and dividends.
Donna Bradshaw, thank you very much for talking to us. Let's just bring you up to date very quickly with the market numbers. Another weak start for the FTSE 100, down by over 49 points at 6,500. Back to you, Julie.
Shola, thank you very much. You're with Sky News over on our website, sky.com/news. Who could win the next election? Get the full details of Sky's exclusive opinion poll. Also coming up, we take a look behind the scenes at how the real transfer of power happens.
The following takes place between 2:34 p.m. and 3:04 p.m.
Ooh, this smells like the rear end of dog.
A bacteriological agent
Get your own yogurt.
Has fallen into the wrong hands.
We've created the mother of all stink bombs.
I need those schematics now.
I've got a visual. Toxic.
All units move in.
Jack and Chloe star in a brand new episode.
You're being set up.
The Simpsons, Sunday at 6:30 on Sky One.
If you've been refused credit elsewhere, nobody tries harder than Welcome Car Finance to get you a newer car. Every year we approve thousands of people for car credit. Many of our top name cars are under 2 years old and all come with an independent quality and safety check and full MOT. Call Welcome Car Finance now and we'll give you at least £1,000 for your old car plus £250 cash back. Call Welcome Car Finance now on 0800 040 9000 or visit our website.
School summer holidays from £499 for the whole family. Call now or go online at havenholidays.com. Haven, the great family get-together.
That's me. Another hard day at work. I don't always make time to do the paperwork. So many different credit bills to sort out at the end of the month. Luckily, my wife's on top of things. She's going to call loans.co.uk. 0800 856 7032. They could consolidate all of your outstanding credit into one easy loan and save you hundreds of pounds a month. Fantastic, fewer bills to worry about, and the option of no repayments for the first 5 months. Now we can get on with what matters in life, each other. If you're a homeowner and you need a loan, call loans.co.uk, 0800 856 7032, or apply online.
I'm an IT manager with benefits and a company car.
If you're underpaid and undervalued and want real career prospects, train for a career in computers with CompuTeach, one of the UK's leaders in IT training. Join thousands who left their old jobs behind. You don't need any qualifications or experience and can stay in your current job whilst you train in your own time. Our dedicated careers team will even help you find your first IT job. Change your life forever. More money, better prospects, better quality of life. Call CompuTeach now on 0800 657 657. Visit us online at computeach.co.uk or text CHANGE to 64118.
Still looking for cheaper car insurance? Not anymore. Hastings Direct has conquered the cost of car insurance, being named cheapest provider for 3 years running.
So, for cheaper car insurance, call 0800 00 1066.
Hastings Direct's UK-based call centres could save you up to £236, or go online. See how much you could save on your car or motorcycle insurance. Call 0800 00 1066 or visit hastingsdirect.com, hastingsdirect.com.
Hello everybody, welcome to Sky News' continuing coverage of the last hours of Prime Minister Blair and the first hours of Prime Minister Brian. I'm inside the quadrangle now at Buckingham Palace. I almost feel like I should whisper. Let me show you the car behind you. That is the Duke of Edinburgh. He will be setting off on an official engagement very shortly indeed, but I point that out to you because that is where it's the last place that we will see Prime Minister Blair. We think that that will happen around about 1:10 this afternoon. He'll have done Prime Minister's question time. He'll have gone back to Downing Street. He'll have said his goodbyes to his staff and his close friends there. And then he'll come down the Mall, and that is the last place that we will see Tony Blair as Prime Minister. Round about 1:25, thereabouts, that's when we'll believe that Mrs. Blair will also go in to see Her Majesty. The audience will have finished then with the Queen, with Mr. Blair. And then we'll see Mrs. Blair go in as well. She'll no doubt have a few words for Mrs. Blair. They'll have met on many occasions, not least when they spent the weekend together at Balmoral. Famously, didn't really enjoy it very much, Mrs. Blair, did she? Well, she won't be doing that again after today. They'll be leaving shortly after that, and then round about 1:40 this afternoon, another car will sweep past us, and in that will be Gordon and Sarah Brown. They'll sweep around the quadrangle again, once again going in through that door, we believe. Mrs. Brown will be sitting, waiting for her husband, as he's taken along that long walk, that corridor, to where Her Majesty will be waiting to greet him. She'll exchange pleasantries with him. And then subsequent to that, Mrs. Brown will also be invited inside, her husband, then the Prime Minister, and they'll come out here, up the Mall again, elated no doubt. They've been waiting 10 years for that honour, and they'll be going to Downing Street. We've got some live pictures of Downing Street to show you. We've seen a removal van outside throughout the morning this morning, no doubt making room for all those toys for the two youngsters that they have. And we are also being told that he's probably going to be there from around about 2:15-ish. What's he going to do for the rest of the afternoon? The latest we're hearing here at Sky News is he's going to start his reshuffle as early as today. That's the latest that we're hearing. No confirmation of that at the moment. We're also actually hearing that Mr. Blair will probably go up to Sedgefield later on this afternoon. And the latest we're hearing on that is that it could be that he has decided that he will announce to his local constituents that he will be stepping down as their MP in order to take over as the Middle East peace envoy. All of that to be confirmed a little bit later on. But for now, we can show you live pictures of Downing Street, likely to see Mr. Blair coming out of there around about 11:30 and heading to the House of Commons for his very final Prime Minister's Question Time. Stay tuned for the very latest here on Sky.
With the option of 7 seats and on-demand all-wheel drive, it's a premium SUV without the premium. The Chevrolet Captiva range from $16,995.
Facing debts big time, up against mounting bills and multiple credit card repayments. Or maybe you want to make some home improvements but aren't sure of the best way to finance them. Tackle all your problems with a quarterback secured loan from Nemo. By consolidating your existing credit, you could reduce your monthly payments and have cash to spare. Even better, with a quarterback loan, you get a quarter back. That's 25% of your interest back after 10 years. For example, if you borrow £30,000 over 15 years, you could get £5,023 back, hassle-free. Our typical APR is only 8.9% variable, but with your 25% interest back bonus, this reduces to 7.6%. So go on. Pick up a quarterback loan from Nemo today. Call free now on 08000 665 665 to see how much you could save and how much we'll give you back, or visit nemoquarterback.co.uk.
Do you suffer from back pain or restless sleep? If your mattress is too old, too hard or too soft, just lying on it can create painful pressure points. The Temper mattress, however, spreads your weight evenly, easing pressure. Developed for the space program, the Temper material actually molds itself to your shape, giving you all the support you need. For details of our 60-night trial, call 0800 131 3679.
We all have a credit report. Yours could determine whether you get a yes or no when applying for credit and the rate of interest you pay. So if you're looking for a mortgage or home improvement loan, a new car, credit card or mobile phone, will the answer be yes or no? Credit Expert from Experian lets you access your credit report online, helping you get the yes you want. Take control of your credit history today. Visit creditexpert.co.uk now for your free 30-day trial.
Any time of the day or night, you might feel like a film. So we've made getting a Sky movie even easier. It's as easy as a click. There's over 300 to choose from. Take your pick. With one tiny click, you can open up a world of fantastic film on your PC at no extra cost. It's amazing what you can fit down a broadband connection. For Sky Movies whenever you like, just go to sky.com/anytime. Pick a flick and click.
Good morning and watching Sky News today. This is the scene live in Downing Street. It's just coming up to 10 o'clock, Wednesday the 27th of June, and the packing cases are being loaded into the removal van. We'll have all the latest on the departure of Tony Blair and the arrival of Gordon Brown in the next hour. Gordon Brown has waited a long time for this occasion. 10 years watching Tony Blair, his old rival and close political friend, sit in that office which he has so long waited for. We'll have more on that and the day's events in a few moments' time. Let's get a look at the weather.
Sunshine. As seen by Qatar Airways passengers, your 5-star airline.
Autumnal conditions continue across Britain and Ireland. Showers today, not the heavy rain. The heavy rain we saw earlier in the week now rolling into southern Scandinavia and across Denmark too. We do have a lot of clouds and a feed of showers from the north. Meanwhile, through southern Europe, we've got a heat wave down in the southeast, which is causing some real trouble down here. 44, 45 degrees, quite unbearable. Much better, milder conditions across Spain and Portugal, which is what you'd expect at this time of year for those regions. Now, our showers will feed into the north and the west, but will be heading down towards the south and the east through the afternoon. So while we'll get some early play at Wimbledon, I do think there'll be disruptions and perhaps an early end through the afternoon as the showers really gather in this southeast corner. As they move their way here, it does, of course, mean there'll be some drier and brighter conditions through central parts of England, Wales and Ireland. For a while, more showers for the north and west of Scotland, and there is more rain to come later.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Good morning from Westminster. On the day that Gordon Brown takes over, we'll have live coverage throughout the day as the Chancellor becomes Prime Minister after waiting for a decade. Out with the old and in with the new, Number 10 prepares to welcome Britain's 52nd Prime Minister. And there's good news for Mr Brown already. A Sky News poll suggests he's closing the gap on the Conservatives. Meanwhile, Tony Blair shows no sign of leaving the limelight. He's expected to confirm he'll become a Middle East envoy and resign as an MP.
And we're live here at Buckingham Palace for one of the most fundamental set pieces of the British Constitution, when the Queen oversees the new Prime Minister.
As the new head of government leaves, carrying the powers of office that the monarch has just bestowed, traditionally the equerry is the first to say, "Congratulations, Prime Minister."
We're showing you exactly what happens behind the palace doors as Gordon Brown receives the trappings of power. We'll follow both men every step of the way from Downing Street to the House of Commons for Mr Blair's last PMQs and along the Mall to Buckingham Palace here. New Prime Minister in time for tea.
In the day's other news, holding back the floodwaters, work continues on the Ali Reservoir as another drowned body is discovered. Plus, back for more. Henman prepares for round 2 at Wimbledon.
This is Sky News with Julie Etchingham, Kay Burley and Martin Stanford.
Well, good morning to you from Westminster on a June morning when Britain gets a new Prime Minister. Scores of reporters in and around Westminster, around the Palace, around Downing Street and here outside the Palace of Westminster. After more than a decade in charge, Tony Blair will become plain old Mr Blair, and his long-standing next-door neighbour and rival, Gordon Brown, will move to the top job. And there's good news today for Gordon Brown as he prepares to take office. A Sky News poll suggests Labour and the Tories are now virtually neck and neck in the polls, with a noticeable bounce for Labour since Gordon Brown took over as party leader. Our political correspondent, Joey Jones, has all the details.
The bandwagon is rolling. The keys to Downing Street are in his grasp. Yesterday, a senior Tory joined the Brown revolution. And now, a Sky News poll confirms the incoming Prime Minister has the Conservatives in his sights. Our poll shows the Conservatives under David Cameron on 37%. Labour under Gordon Brown now right up, snapping at their heels on 36%. Min Campbell's Liberal Democrats still in the doldrums on 12%. Now, the good news for Gordon Brown is that this represents an upward swing of 4.5 percentage points in just 3 months.
On these figures, given Britain's political geography, Labour would be easily the largest party in a new House of Commons and not far short of an overall majority. If you look at the last 50 years, successful oppositions, the ones that have gone on to win the next general election, have at some point in midterm been around 50, 52, 55%. David Cameron is way off that. So if I were David Cameron, I'd be pretty worried at the moment.
And our poll suggests Tory tactics are misfiring. In recent weeks, David Cameron's chief lieutenants have argued they are best placed to maintain Tony Blair's agenda of reform in the public sector. But if our poll is anything to go by, being heir to Blair isn't all it's cracked up to be. Of those polled, a whopping 45% said being heir to Blair is a bad thing for a politician. Only 14% thought it would be a good thing. Gordon Brown, by contrast, has emphasised the need for a new style of politics, and the poll indicates in some respects the public buys into it. Head-to-head, once again the results look good for Gordon Brown. He ranks higher than his Tory rival on trust, on leadership, on running the NHS, the economy and on education policy. Crumbs of comfort for David Cameron? Well, he is ahead on charisma, and he holds a narrow lead on foreign policy and the environment.
Charisma alone doesn't win an election. And if I were David Cameron, I would concentrate above all on getting ahead of Gordon Brown on trust. Remember, it was people's distrust of Tony Blair that cost Labour dear at the last election. And Gordon Brown seems to be winning back the voters' trust.
No question, these numbers will go down well with the Labour High Command. And if David Cameron doesn't turn things round soon, who knows? Gordon Brown might fancy that snap election after all. Joey Jones, Sky News, Westminster.
Let's cross live now to our political editor, Adam Bolton in Downing Street. It's a long time since the removal vans were in Downing Street. Adam, what's happening there at the moment?
Been quite extraordinary morning. I don't think anyone was expecting this. A removal van turned up here shortly after 8 o'clock, and the stuff they've been taking out is very sort of intimate indeed. It shows that until the last moment the Blairs were sort of camping out, having got most of their goods out. We've seen a double bed going into the back of that van. We've seen a treadmill, a running treadmill going in, and a few minutes ago there was an exercise bicycle, a spinning bike. I mean, if it had been 10 electric guitars, we really would have had the kind of cliche of the Blair years going into the back of that van. I don't know whether this was strictly necessary to do it in this very public way, but anyway, we've had a view into the private life of Tony and Sheree. I assume that this is heading towards their new house in Connaught Square near Marble Arch, although of course the Blairs will be heading, after they've been to see the Queen, once Mr Blair is no longer Prime Minister, to Sedgefield, where he is expected to announce that he's stepping down as MP, so that there'll be a by-election there before the summer break, well, just after the summer break at the end of July.
Yeah, I mean, this almost undoubted now that he's got this job as Middle East envoy then, Adam.
Yeah, I think so. Mr Blair this morning talked to Bertie Ahern, the Irish Taoiseach, who incidentally has set up a Blair Chair, a professorship at Liverpool University to look into Anglo-Irish affairs in Mr Blair's honour, and he did say that he's going to take this job. He also has been telling friends that apparently there have been a few hitches in the negotiations because the Russians have at least wanted to voice reservations. They are, of course, part of the quartet, along with the EU, the US and the UN. But Mr Blair seems certain to get this job to do what he can for the Middle East peace process. It's something he said he'd do, and now he's doing it.
So we're just seeing that removal van making its way down to the end of Downing Street. And there are extraordinary scenes, Adam. Let's just talk then about the business of government then. I mean, today is a day for these extraordinary constitutional procedures, really, but seeing both Tony Blair and Gordon Brown going in turn to the palace for that formal transfer of power. But when does the business of government get going, Adam, and how soon do you think we can anticipate a reshuffle?
Well, it reminds everyone, of course, that the Prime Minister is the head of government, but the Queen is the head of state, and until the Queen does her stuff and asks someone to form a government, they are not Prime Minister. Now, the plan, and I have to say, the Brown camp have been perfectly open about this, what their plans are. The plan is for Gordon Brown to come back here in Downing Street, to say a few words and go in and start work shortly after 2 o'clock. They are saying it is not their intention to announce the cabinet today. Mr Brown, when he goes in, has to have formal meetings with the Cabinet Secretary, Sir Gus O'Donnell, and other officials to make sure all the levers of power are in place. Of course, they know each other very well, but his status is immediately changed. And the intention is to have an orderly announcement of the cabinet tomorrow, with the cabinet meeting once it's all been put in place, the new cabinet that is. And of course we know that some familiar faces are going today, including John Reid, the Home Secretary, and John Prescott, along with Tony Blair. There are at least 4 cabinet vacancies. We expect possibly there could be up to a dozen new faces. It is possible that names might start leaking out this evening, but neither the civil service staff working for Gordon Brown, nor, it has to be said, his spin doctors, his political staff, are saying that they want to start announcing cabinet names this afternoon.
OK, Adam, I know you'll be across that as soon as it happens for us. Thank you very much indeed for that. Well, let's return then to the matters of procedure today and some very formal matters to take place. I'll hand you now to my colleague Kay, who's at Buckingham Palace. Hi, Kay.
Hello, Julie. Yeah, it looks an awful lot warmer where you are than it is here in the quadrangle at Buckingham Palace. Really nippy for at the end of June, certainly. I think my nose is running as well, but never mind. They won't care about the cold weather here today. Certainly Mr. Brown won't. He's likely to arrive shortly after 1:30 today, and the next time he comes out of those doors just behind me, he will be the new Prime Minister. Of course, we'll try and grab a few words with him. Whether he stops to have a chat or not, who knows? Stay tuned to Sky News to find out. But I just want to run through the rest of what's happening for you today. The timetable here at the Palace and also up the road at number 10 Downing Street. Tony Blair will leave number 10 for the House of Commons at around about 11:30 this morning for the last time. He'll take his last Prime Minister's question time at midday, as always. You can watch that live, every syllable, here on Sky News. After that, Mr. Blair will return to Downing Street for the last time, say goodbye to his staff, make sure that the removal men have taken everything they need to. And then about half an hour after that, he's expected to finally leave number 10 for the short journey to Buckingham Palace, where we're standing at the moment. At a meeting with the Queen at around about 1:10, Mr. Blair will formally offer his resignation as Prime Minister. His wife, Cherie, will probably walk in and have a chat with Her Majesty about 15 minutes after that. They'll both then leave the palace, possibly for his Sedgefield constituency, where he's expected to announce that he's also quitting as an MP after 24 years. The latest we're hearing here at Sky News is that he will take up the role as the Middle East peace envoy. That's not yet been officially announced, but Bertie Ahern says that he was on the phone to him earlier on today, and he told the Irish Taoiseach that that is what he plans to do. Stay tuned and find out what happens as far as that's concerned. Once Mr. Blair has left, it's Mr. Brown's turn. He'll head to the palace, where the Queen will formally ask him around about 1:40 to head her government. Mr. Brown will finally enter 10 Downing Street as Britain's new Prime Minister around about 2:15 this afternoon. So all the action will see the last of the old Prime Minister and the first of the new Prime Minister behind me here in the quadrangle at Buckingham Palace. But what actually happens the other side of that door? Let's find out with Alistair Bruce.
The powers of Prime Minister are passed from one person to the other through the Queen as head of state in a simple but symbolic process. Tony Blair will leave Downing Street for the last time as Britain's Prime Minister. Police will sweep him up the road to Buckingham Palace to see the Queen for the final time using the official car. The convoy goes in through the North Centre Gate and then straight into the central quadrangle and up to the King's Door. Here the Queen's equerry, Commander Heber Ackland, will be waiting for him with the words, "Welcome, Prime Minister." Once inside, he will go up the King's staircase to the principal corridor. Meanwhile, his private secretary will sit with the Queen's private secretary in another room. The equerry escorts Tony Blair along the corridor to the private audience chamber, where the Queen waits inside. The equerry will then knock on the door, enter, bow, and use the words, "The Prime Minister, Your Majesty." This will be the last time he will ever be referred to as Prime Minister. In private, the monarch will then thank him for 10 years as her Prime Minister, and then ask formally for advice as to who should be called next. Constitutionally, we all know who that will be, but at the moment he gives the name of Gordon Brown, and the Queen accepts, Tony Blair ceases to be Prime Minister. After exchanging a few pleasantries, the Queen will press the bell, thus signalling to the equerry to open the door, and the audience is at an end. Now, traditionally, the equerry will refer to Britain's former Prime Minister as plain Mr. Blair. thus signalling that his term of office is over. Once Tony Blair's car has left the palace and gone to a new destination with less police and fewer advisors, a brief period of time elapses before the Queen's private secretary rings Gordon Brown to invite him for an audience with the Queen. With the handover so well anticipated, much of this may already have been planned, but formalities will still be observed. Gordon Brown knows his fate, but only the Queen can make him her Prime Minister. This time, the equerry will say, "Mr. Brown, Your Majesty." During a private conversation, the Queen invites Gordon Brown to form her government. The moment he says yes, he becomes Prime Minister. Tony Blair will have handed over the formal seals of office as First Lord of the Treasury, which is the Prime Minister's other formal title. If so, the Queen will hand these to Gordon Brown, her new Prime Minister. When the audience is over, the Queen presses the bell. As the new head of government leaves, carrying the powers of office that the monarch has just bestowed, traditionally the equerry is the first to say, "Congratulations, Prime Minister." The new Prime Minister travels straight to 10 Downing Street and will be surrounded by all the trappings of power the Queen has given him.
Let's speak now to royal commentator Dickie Arbiter, who spent many a year behind those doors. Hello to you, Dickie. A day like today, how's it viewed inside the palace?
Well, it's viewed as a procedure that they've done time and time again. Tony Blair will arrive through the King's door, up the King's staircase, along the Lord Chamberlain's corridor to the Queen's corridor, into the audience room. And he'll have time there before Mrs. Blair is called in. She will be waiting in a room opposite with a lady in waiting. And when Tony Blair's audience is over, she will be called in for a formal goodbye, and that'll be it. He'll arrive in his prime ministerial limousine and leave in a government pool car. Gordon Brown will arrive in a government pool car and leave in the prime ministerial limousine. It works like clockwork.
Now, I've seen the movie The Queen. Does he kiss her hand or not?
No. I mean, in The Queen, you had the Prime Minister grovelling around on the floor. Well, it doesn't happen like that, and it doesn't happen at all at this particular time. It happens at Privy Council. Gordon Brown would have already done that because he is a Privy Councillor, but he will do it again as Prime Minister. And it's not grovelling around on the floor. They use a stool known as the stool that they use for investitures at knighthoods, so he's not having to go down too far, and it's just a short brush of his lips on her hand, and that's it. But nothing like the Queen.
What's it like actually inside that meeting? Do we know? Apparently there's just the two of them in there. It's always completely private. And I was listening to, I think it was John Major on the Buckingham Palace website yesterday, and he was saying you can be totally frank, perhaps even indiscreet with the Queen.
You can say anything and everything because you know that your conversation is not going to go anywhere, unless, of course, you're going to blow the gaff on that. But conversation between you and the sovereign are absolutely private. It's an interesting room because if you face the palace and you look down the extreme right-hand side, down round the corner, it's a room that overlooks the garden, very well lit, very comfortable, lots of family photographs, and it is completely private. There's nobody in there. Nobody knows what's being discussed except the two people themselves.
What about this suggestion that the Blairs didn't like going to Balmoral very much?
Well, I think that really came out. It's a sort of, it's something that's been pushed around by newspapers. Sometimes these myths do tend to be fact. I think it's a little bit of an inconvenience in that if you're not a country person, you don't particularly like the countryside. And there have always been those odd photographs of Mrs. Blair at, say, Braemar, for example, yawning. Unfortunate picture. It's one of those things that prime ministers have to do. They've done it since the days of Victoria, and they will do it beyond the Queen's reign. It's not an invidious job to do. You're only there for a night or two nights, and make it for what it is. It can be fun. If you don't want it to be fun, it can be miserable.
How does Her Majesty, do we know how she feels about those weekly audiences with her Prime Minister?
I think she looks upon them as really being briefed and filled in. She does have meetings with other ministers and she does take the advice of ministers, but it's one way for her, over and above her own engagements of keeping her finger on the pulse of government, what's happening in the world. Yes, she watches news bulletins on Sky, on BBC, but it's really getting to the heart of government, and that way she does it through her Prime Minister. And sometimes even Prime Ministers ask the Queen for advice. You know, they're in a sticky situation. They might have asked their colleagues, but asking a third party who is not political, who is not party oriented, you might get a bit of sound advice. And the Queen's been around the traps for a long time. Gordon Brown will be her 11th Prime Minister, and she'll probably have a lot of advice to give him too.
A quick thought about Gordon Brown. He's going to be very nervous when he drives through the quadrangle today and walks that long staircase to see Her Majesty and be told that he will be her Prime Minister for however long it might be. How does she tend to put people at their ease?
She starts the conversation immediately. I mean, she's met Gordon Brown on numerous occasions, so he's no stranger. But it is slightly nerve-wracking when you go in to meet the Queen, particularly in this instance. He is going there for her to ask him to be Prime Minister and to form a government. So he's the new kid on the block, although he's been Chancellor for 10 years, and it will be slightly nervous, but he's a robust man. He's not shy, he's not backward in coming forward, and the Queen does put people at their ease very, very quickly.
OK, Dickie Arbiter, royal commentator for now, thanks very much indeed. You'll probably just be able to hear the Sky News helicopter. I can see it just over my right-hand shoulder. We're going to give you those aerial views throughout the morning, and of course those all-important views down the Mall when the Prime Minister makes that journey for the last time, and then the Prime Minister in waiting also makes that journey and then heads back up to number 10 Downing Street. Before all that, of course, it is going to be Prime Minister's Question Time. We cover it every week for you here on Sky News. 12 o'clock, you'll know that already if you're a regular viewer. And also worth mentioning that Peter Morgan, the man who actually wrote The Queen, he's going to be sitting in the public gallery during Prime Minister's Question Time this afternoon, perhaps looking for a script for his next movie, who knows. A little bit earlier on, we were asking you how many Prime Ministers Her Majesty has seen in her reign since 1952. Many of you got it right already, but we don't just want the number, we want the names as well, please, if you don't mind. news@sky.com. news@sky.com. Julie's up at the House of Commons for us. Julie.
OK, thank you very much indeed. Back to you a little later. Our top stories then here on Sky News this morning. And a Sky News survey shows it would be a close contest between the two major political parties if an election was called now. Our poll shows the Conservatives under David Cameron on 37%. Labour under Gordon Brown has risen to 36%. Tony Blair moves out of Downing Street as he ends his 10-year stint as Prime Minister. After meeting the Queen, he'll go to his constituency in Sedgefield, where he's expected to confirm his plans to become a Middle East peace envoy. And in other news today, the body of a man has been recovered in Worcestershire. He's the fourth known victim of the floods. Engineers are continuing to pump water out of the Ali Reservoir in Rotherham. They say there is still a risk the dam there could burst. Let's just bring you some more of the pictures that we've been getting from Downing Street this morning. The extraordinary removals that have been going on quite late in the day, it has to be said. I think we can see the running machine being taken out of number 10 and into that van. And we were talking to our political editor, Adam Bolton. He said it's been an extraordinary, I mean, short of the electric guitars being wheeled out, we've almost got a sort of symbol of the Blair years being taken out of the doors of number 10 and into the back of the waiting van. Now, we're just presuming that this van then heads off to Connaught Square, but some remarkable sort of personal details, and apparently that was just preceded by a double bed and one of the Blairs' tables. So we're getting a last snapshot into the lives of the Blairs as they pack up at number 10, and alongside me there goes the table. Goodness, it's like the generation game. Alongside me is Baroness Sally Morgan, who was top number 10 aide, really Tony Blair's gatekeeper. Now, Baroness, thank you very much indeed for joining us. And it is a momentous day,
Yes,
and they are amazing pictures, aren't they?
They are phenomenal, yeah. No, I mean, I think the running machine is very strongly symbolic, I think, of Tony. I mean...
Did he use it?
Oh, yeah, no, the gym was the one place he could hide, you see, from everybody who was after him for decisions or agreeing things or sorting out his diary or whatever. So he was in the gym, and he escaped. And he was there quite a lot, actually.
Well, I mean, rewind us then for 10 years. We were just saying before we came on air to chat that it seems, I think, whichever perspective you looked at it from, it was sped by, really. Those days, those images of Tony Blair going into Downing Street are so marked, aren't they? They are so famous now. What are your reflections on a day like today?
I suppose it's gone incredibly quickly, and yet I think what we've forgotten is how different the country was in 1997. I mean, there was obviously this amazing mood of optimism and hope about the Blair leadership. But I actually think a lot of it's been fulfilled. I mean, I do think the country is really different than it was in 1997. I mean, you only need to visit Leeds or Manchester to see the transformation that's taken place. And I just think we're a much more confident, socially liberal, modern country than we were in 1997.
But I mean, you must still have that regular and close contact. You must still be able to read what this man is thinking, and he must know that his undoing was Iraq. Is this a man who was ultimately frustrated in office because of this?
No, I don't think he was. I mean, he believed strongly that Iraq was the right thing to do, and still believes that. Of course, it's had a significant impact on his leadership, and it's been a huge issue in the country. But I think there's a whole range of other ways in which he's taken the decisions he came into government to take. I mean, he wanted to see, he wanted to put real effort into public services, into health and education, and he's been able to do that. Now we argue about details of the health service. We don't argue whether the health service can survive, and that's where we were in 1997.
Well, doctors, I'm sure, would argue against that point. I mean, given the way that they've voiced their opinions in the last few weeks. But let's talk about what lessons were learned by Tony Blair, because Gordon Brown, by sort of promoting this idea of the fact that he does offer change, suggests that he has maybe learned lessons where Tony Blair didn't. Is that a fair analysis?
I'm sure Gordon's learned lessons over the last 10 years. I mean, he's been part of a government that's, and therefore, in a sense, what he needs to do is a combination of both change but also continuity. He can't turn his back, nor does he want to turn his back on the last 10 years, but he also has to show that he's different. I don't think the policies will be very different, personally. I think the style of government will, and he's a different person, he's a different personality, and I think that's what we'll see a difference in.
Baroness Morgan, thank you very much indeed for coming to talk to us. I know you'll be off to witness extraordinary events here and around Westminster. Our helicopter is up in the skies above us, marking the route a little later on, which will be taken by the Prime Minister. And you can see there too, I'm just looking at the shots that you're seeing now, that area just before the Palace of Westminster. Once again, an Iraq protest. We were discussing there with Baroness Sally Morgan, and it has never gone away, and it is here on the last day. The families of those who lost loved ones want to make their presence felt as Tony Blair makes his way to the Palace of Westminster, to the House of Commons for his final Prime Minister's questions. Let's head now back to Martin for the rest of the day's news.
Julie, thank you. Yes, so the other stories in brief for you. The catastrophic floods that caused chaos across parts of Britain have claimed another life. The body of a man has been recovered from his submerged car in Worcestershire, bringing the death toll from the extreme weather to 4. In areas around Rotherham, several hundred residents have spent another night in temporary accommodation as engineers battle to save Ully Dam, which remains in a stable but critical condition. A youth has been stabbed to death in North London, the third killing involving a teenager on the capital street since the weekend. Police were called to reports of a disturbance involving a group of youths at the junction of Tollington Way and Axminster Road in Islington. The victim, a white youth in his mid-teens, who's not been named, was pronounced dead at the scene. An 11-year-old boy killed in a freak accident when a tree branch fell on him during an adventure holiday has been named as Daniel Mullinger. He was killed yesterday during a school trip in the grounds of Felbrigg Hall near Cromer in Norfolk, while taking part in an outdoor activity course run by his primary school. Another 11-year-old boy who suffered pelvis and internal injuries in the incident is in a critical but stable condition. Millions of people could be prescribed cholesterol-cutting drugs called statins under guidelines published today by the government's clinical watchdog NICE. GPs will be told to draw up a systematic strategy to identify which patients on their books are most at risk of developing heart problems. The NICE guidelines say that people who are found to have a 20% or greater chance of developing cardiovascular disease over the next decade should then be prescribed statins to try to reduce their cholesterol. No rest today for Tim Henman at Wimbledon. He's back on centre court for the third day running for a second-round match against the big-serving Spaniard Feliciano Lopez. That follows Henman's epic victory against Carlos Moya, spread over the first 2 days, that ended in a 13-11 final set victory. So Lopez next, age 25. He's 7 years younger than Tim, and he's got to the quarter-finals at Wimbledon 2 years ago.
This is Sky News Live from Westminster on our website, sky.com/news. What's your message to Gordon Brown? Join the discussion on our website this morning. Also coming up, just who is Sarah Brown? We'll find out more about the incoming PM's wife. And has he got what it takes to be a strong PM? We ask his colleagues.
In the old days, if you fancied watching something half decent, you had to sit down when the newspaper told you. Then Sky Plus bowled into your life and that all changed. Now you watched quality stuff whenever you felt like it. Fast forward to 2007 and you clock this thing called Anytime on your TV guide. Get in, you chirp. See, Anytime brings you a tasty bunch of shows via Sky Plus and HD that you might just want to discover. Sky Anytime. Your Sky on demand.
Where were you the day the tsunami struck? Where were you the day of the Paddington rail disaster? Where were you the day 1 million people fled Sudan? The Red Cross were there, and we're there today around the world for millions of people whose lives have been devastated by crisis. Will you be there for them today? Will you give £2 a month to the British Red Cross by calling 08000 83 5000 so we can help more people in desperate need? Your £2 a month could help us bring food to the hungry, shelter to the homeless, medicine to the dying. It could help us bring families back together. So please, do something amazing today. Give £2 a month to the British Red Cross now by going online or by calling 08000 83 5000. That's 08000 83 5000. Thank you.
This one's for all those people out there who feel like they have a big mortgage. NatWest One simply combines your mortgage with your current account. Depending on how much you leave in your account each month and the size of your mortgage, you could seriously shrink it, making you incredible savings and knocking years off. To find out how many years you could shrink your mortgage by, call us now on 0800 408 2532. That's 0800 408 2532. Or go to natwest.com/shrinker.
For our best deals on school summer holidays, call now or go online at havenholidays.com. Haven, the great family get-together.
Please give £2 a month to help the British Red Cross save lives. Call 08000 83 5000.
Welcome back to Westminster. Well, they say that behind every good man is a good woman, and the woman behind Gordon Brown is his wife, Sarah, of course. She now steps into the difficult role of Britain's First Lady, a job which, as we know, can have its pitfalls. Sky's Sarah Hughes has been assessing her prospects.
How do you like being the Prime Minister's wife, Sarah?
She's been the First Lady in waiting for long enough. Sarah Brown's time has come. But is she prepared for her new life at number 10? Novelist Kathy Lett has been friends with Sarah for 18 years.
Sarah's ready, yeah. She's had enough time to prepare. She's very down to earth. She's passionately political, but not in a pushy way. She will make an impact, and the country will like her. They'll respect her. She's very dignified, but she does have a quite wicked and mischievous sense of humour, which will come out more, I hope, because she can be a party girl, not just a political party girl. We might get her dancing on the odd tabletop.
She was born Sarah Macaulay in Buckinghamshire in 1963 and spent her early childhood in Tanzania. When she was 7, her parents split up and Sarah moved to North London with her mother. She was educated here at Ackland Burley Comprehensive and later Camden High School for Girls. Academically, she shone, and her career in PR was equally high-flying. She founded a consultancy with her friend Julia Hobsbawm, and her job led her into Gordon Brown's life. They married in Scotland in 2000, and Sarah gave up work when she learned she was expecting their first child. But then came tragedy, with the loss of their daughter Jennifer Jane when she was just 10 days old. Sarah now concentrates on Project Brown, supporting her husband and raising their 2 young children, John, who's now 3, and 11-month-old Fraser, who has cystic fibrosis. She also works tirelessly for charity. But the relative privacy Sarah has enjoyed is a thing of the past.
Being the Prime Minister's wife is a privileged role, but there are pitfalls, as the gaffe-prone Cherie Blair soon discovered. In 2002, she was forced to apologise for remarks about Palestinian suicide bombers.
I would agree with that, as long as young people feel they've got no hope but to blow themselves up. We're never going to make progress, are we?
Next came the Bristol Flats scandal. When it emerged, convicted fraudster Peter Foster had helped Mrs Blair with a property deal.
I know I am in a very special position. I'm the wife of the Prime Minister. I have an interesting job and a wonderful family. But I also know I am not Superwoman.
And then this cringe-making rendition of a Beatles classic.
Will you still feed me when I'm 64?
What happens to Cherie, and we'll have learnt things from it. And I think the public interest was unprecedented, and I think that will continue, but I think people have got much smarter in working out how to deal with it, and I think that's a good thing, because it can be very, very difficult to deal with that intense media interest in very personal aspects of your life.
Friends say Sarah Brown is likely to be a quieter and more traditional consort than Cherie. And the years living next door to the Blairs will have taught her a lot. There's one lesson in particular she'd be wise to heed. Never answer the doorbell in your nightdress. Sarah Hughes, Sky News.
Well, we're at Westminster in about an hour's time. Tony Blair will be making his way just down here, of course, for his final Prime Minister's questions. You can get much more too on our Sky News website, sky.com/news, including Boost for Brown. Check out the full details of Sky's exclusive opinion poll online. And also coming up, find out how young Gordon started out on the road to number 10. And is Brown right for Britain? We're joined by Michael Portillo and Lord Elder to debate that issue next.
We challenged Churchill and he guaranteed to beat the renewal price on our home insurance.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
And he automatically gave us 40 grand's worth of contents cover, which is plenty for us.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
So we didn't have to work out exactly how much all our stuff was worth.
Oh, come on, homeowners, challenge Churchill. If you haven't claimed for 3 years, we guarantee to beat the renewal price for your home insurance.
I'm Michael Winner, and I'm talking to real eSure customers.
I just want to be treated as a person, not a statistic. And yes, they do treat me like a person.
I think their customer service is excellent.
Because I've been so happy with the service they've provided, I just continued renewing each year.
Calm down, dear. If you've got 4 or more years no claims, call eSure now on 0800 030 4445 or visit esure.com.
Looking for a home? Visit primelocation.com. No other website has all the properties from the country's leading estate agents. Everything. Townhouses, country houses, flats, new homes and properties abroad. So if you're looking to buy or rent, visit primelocation.com. And if you're selling or letting, make sure you choose a Prime Location agent. primelocation.com. Don't move home without it.
We all have a credit report. Yours could determine whether you get a yes or no when applying for credit and the rate of interest you pay. So if you're looking for a mortgage or home improvement loan, a new car, credit card or mobile phone, will the answer be yes or no? Credit Expert from Experian lets you access your credit report online, helping you get the yes you want. Take control of your credit history today. Visit creditexpert.co.uk now for your free 30-day trial.
Football this July on Sky Sports. The Copa America reaches its climax. Liverpool, Fulham and Portsmouth head to Hong Kong for the Asia Trophy. while Arsenal welcome PSG, Valencia and Inter Milan for the Emirates Cup. And the legends of football return in the Central, Scottish and London Masters. July on Sky Sports. For details on how to join in, call 08702 407 726.
Welcome back to Westminster, where all is abuzz with the departure of Tony Blair and the arrival at number 10 of Gordon Brown. This our live camera position in Downing Street. It's quietened down there from the scenes we witnessed a little earlier on when that enormous removals van was seen taking away a table, a double bed, a running machine, a spinning bicycle. We didn't quite see the cuddly toy, but I'm sure it was in there too. We've also got live camera positions along Whitehall and also down towards Buckingham Palace itself, where Tony Blair will make his way after Prime Minister's questions and hand over the seals of office. Then the Queen will phone Gordon Brown, invite him to Buckingham Palace, and the handover of power will happen formally there. So many people reflecting on the Blair years and contemplating what might be to come. Lord Elder, a very long-standing friend of Gordon Brown, has joined us here on the green, and also Michael Portillo from the Conservatives to contemplate what sort of Prime Minister Gordon Brown will make. Thanks both gentlemen indeed for joining us. Lord Elder, I'm coming to you first. I mean, you've known him for so many years. You, above all else, will know how long a wait it's been for this man. But isn't the reality that the country knows too much about him and they could do with a change, really, not more of the same?
You say he's a long wait. He's, for the last 10 years, been doing a hugely important job, which he's widened beyond the normal job of Chancellor to be a much more international figure. And I think people will be surprised by the imagination Gordon shows in the job. He's got the most remarkable political imagination I have come across. He's a creative thinker. He will widen the appeal of the party and of the government, I'm quite sure, and I think people will be genuinely surprised.
Michael Portillo, what do you make of that?
Well, I think the paradox about Gordon Brown is that he is indeed a familiar figure, and I think you're right to say, you know, there's some question as to whether this is going to look different or not. On the other hand, I feel we know so very little about him. For a person who's been there, we understand so little about what his attitudes to foreign policy would be, and even how his government will turn out to be. What I think we do know is that he's not the stage actor that Tony Blair has been, but maybe we've seen in the last couple of days with what he's been doing, inviting the Liberals into his cabinet, the Liberal Democrats, that he's an amazing stage manager. And so I think political drama does lie ahead.
In what sense political drama? Lord Elder, are we about to lose having a leader of this country with some charisma? Is that something that you regret?
I think you're making all sorts of judgments as to how things will turn out. Gordon is different in style from Tony, undoubtedly. He will define his own, the way he's perceived in the role, inevitably by being himself. And I think people will then have to decide whether that balance of experience and knowledge and integrity and drive is what they want from the Prime Minister. I think they will.
But the flip side of that, as many have pointed out, is that this is a man who is obsessed with micromanagement, is Stalinist in his approach to dealing with his team, and will keep those closest to him yet.
Well, I know that is much repeated in the media. I have, in 55 years of knowing him, seen no evidence of any of that. It just seems to me to be something that is endlessly repeated. I don't think it's true, and I think people will be surprised at the extent to which he widens out the range of support for the government in the next few months.
Michael, are you surprised at the sort of bounce effect that Gordon Brown has had? I mean, I know that in these days people traditionally dismiss the polls, but our poll today puts him almost neck and neck with David Cameron. This is a moment when it appears that the country has warmed to this man.
Well, I'm slightly surprised because the Conservative game plan, of course, was that Gordon Brown would have a hellish 7-week campaign fighting for the job of Labour Party leader with lots of negative publicity and lots of focus on his supposed flaws, and none of that has happened. However, broadly speaking, I think it's predictable that a new Prime Minister would produce a bounce. I mean, John Major produced a bounce for the Conservatives after Margaret Thatcher. And the polls now are in an interesting position, because they're no longer good enough for the Tories to feel in any way confident about winning. On the other hand, they're by no means good enough for Labour, for Gordon Brown to contemplate a snap election. And indeed, I think he'll be with us until 2010, and then he'll have an election.
Well, that's interesting. Lord Elder, what do you think he'll do?
I think Prime Ministers tend to make decisions about when they're going to have elections on the basis of when they think they can win an election. No doubt he's got a game plan at the back of his mind, but the idea that these things are set in stone in advance, seems to me just not to be consistent with reality.
Well, even with the appointment, and it was a very high-profile time to announce it, wasn't it? Douglas Alexander in that election planning role. I mean, that tipped everybody into wondering whether maybe now is the time, with this bounce, with this support, to go for it.
I know that in the run-up to 97 it was rather different, but in 2001 and then 2005, where Gordon was doing the campaign coordinator role, he was very conscious of the fact that it is really quite difficult to fit into that and take over just a month or so before an election. And he felt very strongly that there was a continuing role. And I think what that appointment does is shows that he wants someone with a continuing role. I don't think you should draw too many conclusions about timing from that.
OK, Michael Portillo, how do the Conservatives now have to respond, in your view, to Gordon Brown as Prime Minister? He hasn't moved to the left, as many predicted, particularly within the Conservatives he would. We know that the Tories have painted themselves as the true heirs to Blair. That was attributed, of course, to George Osborne. But where do they find themselves? I mean, he has planted himself very firmly as Tony Blair's heir, Gordon Brown, in the last few weeks.
Yes, I think that was a Tory miscalculation. In my view, there never was a chance that Gordon Brown was going to move to the left. I mean, the Labour position is still quite strong, but it's more precarious than it was before the previous 3 elections. And therefore, this is the last time at which he's going to risk moving to the left and sacrificing any of the centre ground. And indeed, what Gordon Brown has done the last few days is, if anything, to shore up the centre ground by saying, for example, the trade unions will have a lesser role in policy making. What do the Tories have to do? They're ahead on charisma, they're behind on strength, and Cameron has to build up his strength to compete with Gordon Brown.
OK, we'll talk a little bit further about that in a moment. We're just bringing our viewers some latest pictures, and I think, gentlemen, you can probably just about see there is Gordon Brown arriving at the Treasury this morning. I'm not sure which vehicle there is, perhaps at the back there, look. Just arriving at the Treasury, and a momentous morning for this man who's waited for so long. Lord Elder, you've known him since a child. You've been through some extraordinary life experiences. Just give us an anecdote of what he was like when young and how it fits in with the picture that we now see.
Well, I think it's very difficult to pick an anecdote, to be honest. I remember him very much from, well, I remember him before school, but all the time I've known him, he's a much more rounded figure than people give him credit for. At school, he was best known for being a seriously good sportsman, but he was also in the school choir. He was also, you know, he did all the sort of extracurricular activities that schools did then. So it wasn't just the academic side, and I think that's always what people get wrong about Gordon. You know, they know he reads a lot, so they assume it's all about politics and economics. No, it's about a far wider range of things than that. So I think the complete picture of the man is really some way away from being in the public mind yet.
I was saying to Murray earlier that the only conversation I've ever held with Gordon Brown was about Scottish painting, about which he knows a bit and I know a tiny bit. And in a way, that tells me both sides of Gordon Brown's character. I mean, both that he is indeed a well-rounded figure, as Murray says, but also it is extraordinary that I, as his shadow, only had the opportunity ever to have one conversation with him. So I think that tells you both halves of the character.
OK, well, we'll see what emerges in the coming days. Of course, the business of government will have to get cracking pretty swiftly after all the historic events of today. But Lord Elder and Michael Portillo, thank you both very much indeed for coming to join us on Sky News this morning. Well, you're with Sky News. Let's take you through then the top stories this morning. And a Sky News poll has shown that it would be a close contest between the 2 major political parties if an election were called now. Our poll shows the Conservatives under David Cameron on 37%. Labour under Gordon Brown has risen to 36%. Tony Blair moves out of Downing Street as he ends his 10-year stint as Prime Minister. After meeting the Queen, he'll go to his constituency in Sedgefield, where he's expected to confirm his plans to become a Middle East peace envoy. And in other news this morning, the body of a man has been recovered in Worcestershire. He's the 4th known victim of the floods. Engineers are continuing to pump water out of the Ally Reservoir in Rotherham. They say there's still a risk the dam could burst.
It's all happening here in the quadrangle in around about 2 hours' time. We're going to see the Prime Minister come in for the very last time with his wife. He'll be leaving shortly after that. And then we'll see the Labour leader enter, Mr Brown, with his wife, Sarah, and leave the door behind me as the new Prime Minister of this country. But what about the journey for them to get here? Let's find out with Glenn O'Glaser.
Street for his last Prime Minister's questions in about an hour, and across the road you can see outside some people who've got their own verdict on Tony Blair's time in office. They've got their own message to give to the Prime Minister as he leaves, and with us are a couple of members of Gordon Gentle's family. He lost his life in Iraq. Pamela, his sister, Pauline, his grandmother. What's your message to Mr. Blair?
Just like Mr. Blair to come out and spend 5 minutes with the families to see what he's done to families. But he's not got the guts to come out and say sorry.
And you've campaigned, Pauline, long and hard, your family. Rose Gentle, of course, your daughter, has been one of the leading campaigners. What do you expect Gordon Brown to do? How is he going to be different to Tony Blair, do you think?
Well, we have to give Gordon Brown a chance. But if his policies are still the same as Tony Blair's, I'm afraid he'll have to go. And we'll campaign to get him out too. But he must bring their troops home now.
And there's no sign from Mr. Brown at the moment, at least, that he has any intention of doing that.
Well, we don't know. He hasn't said anything yet. So we'll just have to keep pestering him and see what he's going to come up with.
But his message seems to be that the important thing for Iraq is security, and he won't bring troops out until that security is established.
There's no security in Iraq. The Iraqis are winning the war. Our troops are dying, so there's no security. So he's got to bring him out. We're getting our boys brought home in boxes.
Pamela, I mean, have you got any hope at all that Mr. Brown might be anywhere at all different to Mr. Blair?
I'm hoping, really hoping, that he realises that the mistakes and how much hatred there is out here for Tony Blair, that he'll not make the same mistake.
Okay, Pamela and Pauline, Pamela Gentle, Pauline Graham, thank you very much indeed. Well, this demonstration is going to grow. I think they're hoping for more people here, but from now, from outside the gates at Downing Street, back to you, Kay.
Thanks so much indeed, Glenn. Tell you about the timetable here at the Palace in just a moment, after we find out about city reaction to what's happening today with Shola.
Thanks very much, Kay. Well, Gordon Brown has managed to pull off the rare feat of being a Labour Chancellor of the Exchequer, who's relatively popular with business leaders. Now, as he steps up to the top job, what does he need to do now to keep the bosses on his side? Miles Templeman, who's Director General of the Institute of Directors, joins me now. What does business want from the new Prime Minister? Do they want specific changes or just continuity, more of the same?
I think more of the same, broadly. Continuity on the overall economics, stability, but we do want some changes. We want less taxation, less regulation. Some of the trends in the last few years that weren't so evident earlier on when he was Chancellor have worrying business in the last few years.
The taxation is obviously a very big issue. In his last budget, he actually announced a cut in corporation tax to 28%, but presumably you want to see more of a reduction in the tax burden.
Exactly. I mean, the tax burden's risen steadily in the last few years. That reduction in corporation tax was welcome, but as you know, it was counterbalanced by some increases that affected small business particularly. What we'd like to see an overall reduction in the tax rate, particularly, say, inheritance tax.
Now, the issue of taxation has been very much in focus in relation to the private equity industry, concerns that the industry is not paying enough capital gains tax. Do you think that the new government needs to crack down on the private equity tax breaks?
Well, I think private equity needs to get its case over much more strongly. Private equity is a very good part of the British economy. But on the other hand, I do think the capital gains tax regime does need to be looked at. But what we've got to do is make sure it doesn't harm the entrepreneurial development and so on. But there are some areas where perhaps it needs review.
So what do you think needs to be done?
Well, we think that there's various mechanisms to slightly increase the tax on certain parts of the private equity individual world where maybe income or maybe the way taper relief works should be adjusted. But it's very important that we only do it without harming smaller business and smaller investments.
Now, Gordon Brown will be creating a new business council for Britain, and Damon Buffini, who's at the head of one of the private equity groups, will be on that council. Do you think that that appointment will actually make it hard for him to come down on the private equity industry?
No, I don't think so. It doesn't work like that. But I do think it's important for the private equity leaders to be very involved and be more sort of open about what's going on in their sector, which they can be proud of.
OK, thank you very much, Miles Templeman, for talking to us. Let's bring you up to date with market numbers. Another week session, the FTSE 100 down by over 31 points at 6,527. Back to you, Kay.
Thanks very much indeed, Shola. Welcome again to the central quadrangle here at Buckingham Palace. This is where your little bit of history is going to be this afternoon. In about a couple of hours' time, we're going to see Prime Minister Blair entering this quadrangle with his wife, Cherie Blair, for the very last time in the ministerial car. They'll pull up behind me there at the King's door, go in. Then Mrs. Blair will wait with a private secretary while the Prime Minister heads up for his final audience with the Queen. That's only likely to last something like 10-15 minutes. About 1:25 then, Mrs Blair will be called for her audience with the Queen, probably for the very last time as well. They'll leave shortly after that in a different car, no longer have the trappings of office. Plain old Mr Blair, perhaps not for too long though. He could well be the Middle East peace envoy before the end of the week. We'll have to wait and see as far as that's concerned. That's not going to trouble Mr Brown too much. He will be heading, we think, as you can see from these pictures, he's just entered the Treasury a short time ago. He'll be leaving from the Treasury, I believe, something like 1:30, probably 25 minutes to 2, and then he'll head down the Mall again with his wife, Sarah Brown. They'll pull up in the quadrangle again go through the King's door rather, to meet the Queen. Mrs Brown will be waiting for a short time while Mr Brown has his private audience with Her Majesty, likely to last about 10 minutes or so, and then no doubt Mrs Brown will be asked to have a word or two with Her Majesty as well. They'll be coming out of those doors as the new Prime Minister, and shall we call her the First Lady? I'm sure Sarah Brown won't mind it if we call her that. And they'll get into the ministerial car, head out this way, and then up the Mall again and back to Downing Street. Hearing from our political editor, Adam Bolton, that although he will be deciding on his new cabinet, or parts of it today, we probably won't know too much about that until tomorrow morning. But this is where we will be seeing the Prime Minister leaving Downing Street for Prime Minister's question time, probably around about 11:30 this morning. PMQs is 12 o'clock. He'll be leaving about 12:30 back to the Downing Street for the very last time. Stay tuned, 24/7 on Sky.
The Magnet half-price sale is now on with a free American cooler or a free flip-down TV and dishwasher. Plus, right now, there's an extra 10% off cabinet sale prices.
From scooters to sports bikes, you could save on your insurance with Hastings Direct's new rates. Call our bike team on 0800 11 1066 or go online at hastingsdirect.com.
Looking for a home? Visit primelocation.com. No other website has all the properties from the country's leading estate agents. Everything. Townhouses, country houses, flats, new homes and properties abroad. So if you're looking to buy or rent, visit primelocation.com. And if you're selling or letting, make sure you choose a Prime Location agent. primelocation.com. Don't move home without it.
New Ariel with Febreze Effect.
You're on in 2 minutes.
New Ariel with Febreze Effect gives your clothes an irresistible, just washed freshness. New Ariel with Febreze Effect, irresistibly fresh.
We all have a credit report. Yours could determine whether you get a yes or no when applying for credit and the rate of interest you pay. So if you're looking for a mortgage or home improvement loan, a new car, credit card or mobile phone, will the answer be yes or no? Credit Expert from Experian lets you access your credit report online, helping you get the yes you want. Take control of your credit history today. Visit creditexpert.co.uk now for your free 30-day trial.
Patch has got me through it. Looking forward to this.
You ready, love?
I think so. 3, 2, 1.
Group support worked for me.
I got advice by post and email.
There are loads of ways the NHS can help you get rid of cigarettes. To talk to someone about the right way for you to quit, call 0800 169 0169 now or press red.
Any time of the day or night, you might feel like a film. So we've made getting a Sky movie even easier. It's as easy as a click. There's over 300 to choose from. Take your pick. With one tiny click, you can open up a world of fantastic film on your PC at no extra cost. It's amazing what you can fit down a broadband connection. For Sky Movies whenever you like, just go to sky.com/anytime. Pick a flick and click.
Good morning, you're watching Sky News Today, live from Westminster. It's just coming up to 11 o'clock on Wednesday, the 27th of June. Coming up in the next hour, they're packing out this morning and they're moving out. The clock counts down on Blair's premiership. We'll have all the latest live from Westminster as the power is handed over via the Queen from Tony Blair to Gordon Brown. Prime Minister's questions the final with Tony Blair due at midday, and then Gordon heads to the palace.
Rain. As seen by Qatar Airways passengers, your five-star airline.
We are going to see quite a few showers today. After the early start of wet weather in the northwest, by the afternoon they'll be slipping down towards central and southeastern parts of England and Wales. Now that does mean there'll be an emerging dry slot across Ireland, even some bright weather emerging there, and for the north and west of England and Wales too by the end of the afternoon, not looking too bad. Still very cool. You'll notice how nippy it is. It's nearly July and the temperatures really aren't playing well with us at all. We're seeing top temperatures of only about mid-teens. To the end of the day, expect probably a disruption or an end to play at Wimbledon as those showers push their way down the southeast. They clear overnight. You can see there's more to come. And this is Thursday morning, a batch of rain into the southwest of Ireland and some more showers for the north and west of Scotland. Again, they're feeding across from west to east. A brighter day across central eastern areas, but you'll find that rain creeping in and becoming heavier through the night.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Good morning from Westminster on the day that Gordon Brown takes over. We have live coverage throughout the day for you as the Chancellor becomes Prime Minister after waiting for a decade. Man on a mission, a Sky News poll suggests Gordon Brown is closing the gap on the Conservatives. Out with the old and in with the new, number 10 prepares to welcome Britain's 52nd Prime Minister. Meanwhile, Tony Blair shows no sign of leaving the limelight. He's expected to confirm he'll become a Middle East peace envoy and resign as an MP.
And we're live here at Buckingham Palace for one of the most fundamental set pieces of the British Constitution as the Queen oversees the handover of power from Tony Blair to Gordon Brown.
As the new head of government leaves, carrying the powers of office that the monarch has just bestowed, traditionally the equerry is the first to say, "Congratulations, Prime Minister."
We'll be showing you exactly what happens behind the palace doors as Gordon Brown receives the trappings of power. We'll follow both men every step of the way from Downing Street to the House of Commons for Blair's last PMQs and along the Mall to Buckingham Palace. A new Prime Minister in time for tea.
Well, good morning to you from Westminster, the place abuzz with today's historic events. Scores of journalists now gathering here in Whitehall, Downing Street and at the Palace, of course, because today is the day Britain gets a new Prime Minister. After more than a decade in charge, Tony Blair will become plain old Mr. Blair once again, and his long-standing next-door neighbour and rival, Gordon Brown, will move to the top job. Well, a Sky News poll confirms the incoming Prime Minister has the Conservatives in his sights. It seems a good day for Gordon Brown. Our poll shows the Conservatives under David Cameron on 37%. Labour under Gordon Brown, snapping at their heels now on 36%. Sir Angus Campbell's Lib Dems still in the doldrums on 12%. This, though, the good news for Gordon Brown is that this represents an upward swing of 4.5 percentage points in just 3 months. Now, if our poll is anything to go by, being heir to Blair isn't all it's cracked up to be. Of those polled, a whopping 45% said being heir to Blair is a bad thing for a politician. Only 14% that thought it would be a good thing. Now, head-to-head, once again, the results look good for Gordon Brown. He ranks higher than his Tory rival on trust, on leadership, on running the NHS, the economy, and on education policy. Crumbs of comfort for David Cameron. Well, he is ahead on charisma and he holds a narrow lead on foreign policy and the environment. Well, let's get the latest thought on that. We can cross live now to our political editor, Adam Bolton in Downing Street. First of all, Adam, really, before we discuss that poll, you've witnessed some amazing scenes there this morning.
Yes, indeed. A removal van was here for a couple of hours and we saw it loaded up with some of the Blairs' intimate personal effects, including a double bed, a running exercise machine and also an exercise bike. Presumably that's going to their new home near Marble Arch. Meanwhile, of course, we are now expecting the Blairs to leave in the next few minutes to go to the Houses of Parliament for his last Prime Minister's question time. He's done around 300 since he became Prime Minister. And we all remember that first question time back in 1997. The sun was out then, it's not out today, and he walked down Whitehall with his wife. Not sure how he's going to get to Downing Street this time round from Downing Street to Parliament, but Mr. Blair, we're expecting to see him for the first time today coming out of that door. It won't be the last time he leaves Downing Street because he's coming back here after question time before going to Buckingham Palace. So he's still Prime Minister and he's got 2 more exits as Prime Minister to go in that role. Friends and family, of course, will be packing the galleries today for Tony Blair's last appearance. And Mr. Blair has been saying overnight that one of his proudest achievements is that there has indeed been a peaceful and orderly transition from Gordon Brown to Tony Blair without any bloodletting, without really any rumours of a fresh outbreak of the so-called TBGBs in their stormy relationship. He's proud of that achievement. He's also been buoyed up by the number of times that Gordon Brown has used the phrase New Labour, making it clear that he intends to lead a centrist government, not one which reverts to old Labour and a more left-wing approach. Now, that may disappoint some Labour activists, but certainly Mr. Blair believes that his legacy, his government is safe in the hands of a man who, after all, was pretty much the co-star for the past 10 years as the Chancellor of the Exchequer running the economy.
Adam, whilst we're waiting, and we're going to stay with you, of course, until we get that glimpse of the Prime Minister, let's talk a bit about the Sky News poll, and good news it would seem for Gordon Brown.
Yeah, we've definitely seen a closing of the gap between the Conservatives and the Labour Party. David Cameron, of course, has enjoyed a prolonged honeymoon since he took over as leader of the Tories, but now they are back to neck and neck. And remember, because of the vagaries of the British electoral system, neck and neck basically means a Labour victory, Labour the biggest party in Parliament, and the Tories trailing. David Cameron needs to be several lengths ahead of the Labour Party if he's to expect to form the next government. So good news on that. Good news too that so far, as Mr. Brown's team are concerned, that substance appears to be what the voters are looking for, substance winning out over charisma. And one of the key indicators, Julie, which people don't often talk about, which is in our poll, is who do you expect to win the next election? That's often a way of getting round people's party political prejudices. And the key thing is, overwhelmingly, compared to Cameron, voters now think the next election will be won by Gordon Brown. And that gives you, if you like, an insight into the political mood of Britain, that they are braced for a Gordon Brown victory. So David Cameron really has got his work cut out, although I expect he will be keeping some of his powder dry for next week, July the 4th, when he'll face Gordon Brown across the dispatch box for the first time as Prime Minister. Today is almost bound to be Tony Blair's big day, and I think even Tories wouldn't begrudge him that after a remarkable 10 years and 3 general election victories.
Adam, when will the business of government get back to, well, normal in inverted commas? I mean, the big announcement that we'll all be waiting for, of course, is the reshuffle, and whom will be given those top jobs and the lesser ranks around the cabinet table headed by the Prime Minister Gordon Brown.
To be honest, Julie, I think it'll probably be 3 or 4 months yet before we're back in the routine. That's partly because we've got the summer holidays followed by the party conference season, and partly because the scale of changes which we are expecting to see from Gordon Brown is pretty big. We're going to see new faces. We're going to see new structures of government. A lot of talk about this government of all the talents, and some intriguing names who may be linked with policy formation under Gordon Brown. And also we are going to see new directions in terms of policy from Mr. Brown. So I think it will take some time for all of that to bed in. And really, you know, in the quarter of a century covering British politics, I have never known a period such as what we're seeing at the moment. It hasn't been a hiatus, but it's been an extraordinary kind of 9 months of transition, really, for the government, and also overshadowed by extraordinary things such as that police investigation into cash for honours. It's been an unprecedented period, but at the end of it, as I say, Mr. Blair believes it has been a constructive period. He believes that he's reached the final tape absolutely at a sprint, still coming up with fresh policies and fresh developments. And of course we saw that in Africa, we saw that in Europe. We've continued to have the publication of government bills this week. So I think one probably can give him that. And I imagine the final burst, if you like, those final few paces before he hits the tape in the House of Commons at Prime Minister's questions will be equally spectacular. Of course, one of the things we are seeing is a shift in Mr. Blair's view. In the early days, people like me and the rest of the media were regarded as potential allies of the Labour message. That has soured, as we saw in Mr. Blair's speech to the Reuters Foundation, talking about the feral beasts of the 24/7 media. And so he has decided to have the last word as Prime Minister in Parliament rather than to give any extended interviews or statements to the press.
Adam, talk to us a bit about the appointment of the outgoing Prime Minister as Middle East peace envoy. That's widely expected to be confirmed too today, and he's due to head up to Sedgefield. I mean, it's an interesting move, not least because in some quarters there'll be many an arched eyebrow over this. And also many people will look at it and say this is a man not prepared to leave the limelight, quite frankly.
I certainly think that's true. Mr. Blair believes he's got political life left in him. He has, of course, ever since he went to the Middle East after clinching the Belfast Agreement back in 1998, he has believed that he has experience which can contribute to the Middle East peace process. He said it in his last speech to the Labour Party conference in September that he wanted to dedicate himself to trying to get a settlement between the Israelis and the Palestinians, and in that sense he's been as good as his word, taking this job as envoy in the Middle East for the Quartet. That is the group led by America, but also including the EU, the United Nations and Russia. It is, however, a very remarkable thing for Mr. Blair to do. As you say, it means he won't be dropping out of frontline politics, although he will be dropping out of British politics, resigning his seat in Sedgefield this evening, so a by-election can take place next month. He is a controversial figure, as you say, Julie. No one doubts his commitment to peace, but also no one doubts his closeness to the Americans. It's George W. Bush who apparently proposed that he should take up this role of Middle East envoy, and of course Mr. Blair is identified with the American attacks on Afghanistan and subsequently on Iraq, and with supporting the Israelis during last year's bombing of the Lebanon and Hezbollah there. So he has quite a lot of ground to make up. At the same time, remember that Mr. Blair probably can claim credit to being the man who made the argument to George W. Bush that now was the time to recognize the Palestinians, to support for the first time as an American president the idea of a two-state solution with a secure and independent and viable Palestinian state. Mr. Blair backed that up by holding the London conference, getting significant donations to the government of Mahmoud Abbas, the Fatah government there, and also, of course, continued to support that Fatah government. Or now the Palestinians are split between the Hamas in Gaza and Fatah in the West Bank. It's pretty certain that Mr. Blair will be building on supporting the Mahmoud Abbas and trying to get a situation where the Palestinians and the Israelis can negotiate again. It's high-profile stuff. If I was advising him, I would say I wouldn't do that if I were you. But it shows, I think, Mr. Blair's determination to make a difference, how he still feels he's got a mission. And also, I think a little bit it shows that he knows that there are many people out there critical of him because of the Iraq war. We're seeing the families who've lost loved ones in Iraq protesting today. And if those are all negatives, I think Mr. Blair still, for his own record, wants to try and contribute to a positive of some kind of lasting peace settlement in the Middle East.
And it's an interesting area which will be fascinating to observe how Gordon Brown handles Adam too. One of the newspapers this morning carrying an admission from Gordon Brown that mistakes were made in the planning for the aftermath of the Iraq war. And it is a real minefield ahead for him on this, isn't it?
Yes, it is, and things haven't worked out as he said. He said back in June 2003 that the war had been won, that Iraq was free, that those people who said there wouldn't be WMD found weapons of mass destruction would be confounded. It hasn't turned out like that. But one thing one can say, both for Tony Blair and indeed Gordon Brown, is that they haven't tried to sweep Iraq under the carpet, that they've continued high-level political engagement, that both of them this year have been out to Iraq to see the troops there, and the message is that they still want to see the job through, although of course the position has always been that British troops will stay there so long as the Iraqi government wants their support, and the signs coming out from the al-Maliki government is that they would like to see a significant diminution of the British and American troop presence, certainly within the next 12 months and perhaps even before then. So I'm not so sure that Iraq will be a major issue. And now we're seeing coming out of Downing Street the Prime Minister. Good morning! With his personal private secretary and his well-marked ring binder getting in to the official Jaguar to go to in their area. That's because he has a very strong backup team to make sure that he knows what is going on. And we're seeing there the aerial shot of Whitehall and the Palace of Westminster. So on this occasion, Mr. Blair not walking to Parliament as he did his first Prime Minister's questions some 300 PMQs ago, but rather taking the official transport. Of course, there are a lot of demonstrators out lining Whitehall, and also it's not quite such a sunny day. Now, I do know that much of Mr. Blair's family and many of his close friends have managed to get tickets in the galleries around the chamber to watch his final performance today. He'll have a brief word with them after Prime Minister's questions at 12:30. Then he'll come back here for the farewells with Downing Street staff. And round about 1 o'clock, we expect him to be going to Buckingham Palace. And by 1:30, 2 o'clock, Prime Minister Blair will be Mr. Blair, heading then up to his Sedgefield constituency to put in his resignation as an MP in Sedgefield.
Adam, thank you for that. And joining us here on the green and presumably waiting to greet the Prime Minister when you get a chance to get into Parliament. Hazel Blairs, outgoing chair, of course, of Labour, the Labour Party, and didn't make it in your candidacy for the Deputy PM, but who knows what that job's going to be now anyway. Hazel Blairs, thanks for joining us. It is a momentous day. Are you sad to see him go? Do you wish he was staying?
It's, I suppose, a bit bittersweet day today, really. We've got Tony Blair going out as our most successful Prime Minister to date. We've got Gordon Brown coming in, and it is really his day today, taking the reins and looking forward to, not just doing the economic things, but being able to do things right across a broad canvas. So I actually think it's quite an exciting day, and it's quite a happy day for Labour, and I absolutely hope for the country as well, because there is this sense of renewal and not a completely fresh start, because obviously you've got very experienced people in government, but that sense of a real refreshing of what we're doing.
What do you wish that Tony Blair had done differently as Prime Minister?
It's always the question people ask, what wouldn't you have done? What's your greatest mistake? I actually think when we look back on his legacy, actually this country has changed quite dramatically. I do think that most people are better off. They're in work, they can afford the mortgages, their children have a better chance of a decent education. So I think there's a lot on the scorecard that's very positive. Obviously people are going to talk about Iraq and the difficulties there.
Was Harriet Harman right? Should the government apologise?
No, I don't think that's the case at all. I think what we have to do is to support a very fragile democracy in Iraq, try and make sure that the people there have some of the chances that we take very much for granted here in this country. And if you look at places like Afghanistan, again, very difficult, but 3 million children going to school, many of them girls who would never have had the opportunity to do that. So, I think overall it's a pretty positive scorecard that Tony Blair's got. But equally, we've got Gordon coming in today, becoming the Prime Minister, and as I say, the chance to do things right across a broad canvas and look at some of the new challenges. The world today is very different to the world as it was in 1997.
OK, so how will it be different for Hazel Blairs then? What jobs are you going to give you?
I have absolutely no idea what's going to happen to my future.
Have you had a conversation with him about it yet?
Well, everybody has conversations, but I'm the MP for Salford, and I will be that come what may, and that's what gives me my roots in politics. It's what keeps me connected to the concerns of ordinary people in this country, and I actually think that's a very important lesson for politicians. If we lose touch, then we're in a very bad place indeed. So I mean to keep absolutely in touch with the concerns of the public.
All right, well, we'll let you get back in touch with the concerns of your party.
Indeed,
It's an amazing
get to
occasion,
PMQs.
absolutely amazing occasion. We'd all love to be a fly on the wall. Thank you very much indeed, Hazel Blairs. Let's cross straight to the Palace and Kate.
Thanks very much indeed, Julie. I think I can just hear in the background, I'm not sure if you can hear it or not, it's the changing of the guard very shortly indeed. Today it's the 7th Regiment Royal Logistic Corps with a band of the Coldstream Guards, so it says on their website anyway. Can you hear them now? They'll be here any second. We're inside the quadrangle at Buckingham Palace. This is where the Prime Minister's car will be coming through round about 1:10 this afternoon, with, of course, Mrs. Blair as well. They'll sweep round here in the central quadrangle here at Buckingham Palace in the Prime Ministerial car at that stage, and then through here, which is the King's Gate there, can you see? And they will be going in through the King's door and then up to greet Her Majesty. And Mrs. Blair will have to wait outside for a short time, but she probably will be welcomed in once that audience is finished. And then it's Mr. Brown's turn. He's likely to go in and see Her Majesty round about 20 to 2. And by 2 o'clock, we'll see him come out of that door with his wife, Sarah Brown, and he will be the new Prime Minister. For what happens inside, let's speak to a constitutional expert, and that's Vernon Bogdanor. I'm just looking at the police. I wasn't sure they wanted me to move, but I don't think they do, so that's okay. Mr. Bogdanor is joining us from Oxford. Good afternoon to you, sir.
Good afternoon.
Tell us about the relationship between the Queen and her Prime Ministers.
Well, it's a confidential relationship. They meet normally once a week on Tuesday or Wednesday when they're both in London, and no one else is present at that meeting, which lasts for about an hour. Even the private secretary, the Queen's private secretary, isn't present, so no minute is taken of it. And that will be true this afternoon as well, when Tony Blair comes to give his resignation, and then later on when the Queen sees Gordon Brown.
Started off with, I think, Winston Churchill, is that right, back in 1952?
I'm sorry, I couldn't quite hear your question. It's a bad line here. Could you repeat it?
Yes, certainly. I was just trying to remind our viewers who the first Prime Minister would have been. Would that have been Winston Churchill?
Oh, yes. Yes, when the Queen came to the throne, Winston Churchill was Prime Minister, and she must have been rather in awe of him, because he was then in his late 70s. She was a young woman, a young girl really, of 25, and it must have been very difficult for her. But of course, Winston Churchill was a great monarchist, so he would have put the Queen at ease. And the Queen once said that she liked him most of all her Prime Ministers because he was such fun. And of course, he did have a great sense of humour, but times have changed a great deal since then.
I was going to ask you whether you thought she had a favourite. I wonder how she got on with the only woman Prime Minister we've had.
Well, if she's had a favourite other than Churchill, who's a kind of national icon, she hasn't said. She's much too discreet. She's never revealed anything about her conversations with Prime Ministers, and I think never will. But all her Prime Ministers have said that their weekly meetings with her are very useful because they can unburden themselves. They can tell her things that they wouldn't tell their colleagues, knowing that they wouldn't be repeated or passed on. And I think James Callaghan, who was Prime Minister in the 1970s, once said that it was like visiting your psychiatrist, that you could really unburden yourself in a way you couldn't with anyone else.
I know,
and of course the Queen, having been on the throne so... Sorry.
Do carry on.
Go on.
Do carry on.
Well, the Queen, having been on the throne so long, has a tremendous political experience, more than any of her subjects, so she can give very good advice. She could say, well, what you're proposing was suggested by Winston Churchill many years ago. It didn't work then, and frankly, I think it may not work now. And a sensible Prime Minister would take notice of that, I think.
I know John Major was talking about the fact that there was no one else in these meetings, perhaps one or two corgis, but apart from that, that was it. So there are no listed minutes at all of what might have been said.
That's absolutely right. It's an entirely private meeting. After the meeting, possibly the Queen will have a discussion with her private secretary about what's said, and she may give him a summary, but no minute of the meeting is held. It's entirely confidential on both sides. And all the Prime Ministers of the Queen's reign have respected that confidentiality. They've never spoken in substance about their meetings with the Queen, but they've all said it's very helpful, and they're not a mere formality, because the Queen knows what she's talking about. She's read the boxes, looked at the papers and so on, and Harold Wilson once said that he was caught out rather like a schoolboy because he hadn't read his papers properly, but the Queen had. So they're very serious meetings.
10 British Prime Ministers, equal, I think, to what Queen Victoria had. Only George III had more with 13. How do you think she reacts, feels about having that weekly audience with a Prime Minister?
Well, I suspect the Queen regards it as a very valuable part of her functions. It's worth mentioning, since you pointed out Queen Victoria, since you mentioned Queen Victoria, that the present Queen has now had more Prime Ministers than Queen Victoria. Gordon Brown will be her 11th Prime Minister. Queen Victoria, who reigned much longer, for 63 years, she only had 10, so that's something of a record.
Probably a reflection on British politics, I don't know. But thank you very much indeed for joining us here on Sky News. We very much appreciate your time. Sarah Hughes, our royal commentator, is with me as well. Do you feel a little bit of history about to happen?
I think it is, and of course, you know, we saw Tony Blair come here in 1997. Today he's going to make that journey more than 10 years later for a very different reason. I think it will be poignant for he and Cherie Blair as they drive in through here, pull up at the King's door to be met by the Queen's equerry and the lady in waiting. Yeah? That's this one just here where you can see the portico.
Is that the one that they always use?
That is the one they always use, yes. And he will be met by the Queen's equerry, Commander Heber Ackland, and Mrs. Blair will be met by the Queen's lady in waiting, and she will be looked after by the lady in waiting when Mr. Blair is taken up for this final audience with the Queen. And as you were saying, he's had these audiences every week with the Queen on a Wednesday evening.
Even when they couldn't meet, they spoke on the phone, didn't they?
Exactly, and it's a very important time for the Prime Minister and the Queen to meet. It's a totally private
Do they get on?
meeting. Well, if they didn't, we'd never know. The Queen is incredibly discreet. We would never know, but I think that it is a very important relationship for the both of them. The Queen, it is her duty to express her views on government opinion here. She is politically neutral, but it is her duty in those private meetings to express her views and to advise her Prime Minister. And Prime Ministers have said, Tony Blair, we've heard him talk about it, John Major, we've heard them talk about it, about how important it is for them to be able to talk to the Queen in this frank way, knowing that it's not going to come out in anyone's memoirs in any years to come. Cherie Blair then, as you say, will be taken into the audience room after Tony Blair has had his final audience. After
changing of the guard behind us there.
Yes, we can hear the changing of the guard. Business as usual here at Buckingham Palace. But Tony Blair, a fairly ordinary audience, if you like. There's no kneeling, there's no kissing of hands, there's no handing over of the seals of office. It is just a conversation at which he tenders his resignation to the Queen, and then she asks him
who he recommends as his successor. And once he's named Gordon Brown, that's it. He is no longer Prime Minister. And then Mrs. Blair, Cherie Blair, will be shown in, and there'll be some pleasantries between her and the Queen likely to thank her for her support over the past 10 years and possibly ask them what they're going to do next, which we understand is perhaps to go to Sedgefield.
And Mr. Brown shortly after that?
Shortly after that, Mr. Brown.
He sweeps in here as well?
He sweeps in here as well, a much more exciting time for him, that anticipation that Tony Blair would have felt 10 years ago as he came in here, the beginning of his Prime Ministership. He will arrive here with his wife, the same drill. He'll be met by the Queen's equerry. Mrs. Brown will be met by the Lady-in-Waiting. She'll wait with the Lady-in-Waiting while Mr. Brown goes in. A very simple question from the Queen. Are you prepared to take on my government? Can you form my government? That's right. And he will then say yes. And as he's left, we hope, and as he's left, he's waited long enough, and as he leaves, he will be congratulated by the Queen's equerry as Prime Minister, and his wife, Sarah Brown, will also go into the room and exchange pleasantries with the Queen.
Now, I know you've been looking at some detail, actually, about Sarah Brown and her charity work. We're going to be looking in that report just a short time, Sarah, but for now, thanks very much indeed. But what about the young Gordon Brown? How long has he wanted to take that drive here into the quadrangle at Buckingham Palace later on this afternoon and to walk out of the door behind me being the Prime Minister? Let's have a look at his journey with James Matthews.
The new Prime Minister used to like a pint in here. To understand what made Gordon Brown the man, you need to go back in time. Gordon Brown, the party animal who would be Prime Minister. His image now is nothing like it was back here in 1970s Edinburgh. Here he was the thinker, the drinker and the charmer. It's Gordon Brown before he was famous. Taking a journey through Gordon Brown's past takes a Ford Popular. Gordon Brown doesn't drive these days because he only has the sight of one eye. But he did learn, and when he did, it was in a Ford Popular. It was the family car when he grew up in the town of Kirkcaldy. James Gordon Brown, the middle of three sons. His dad was the local minister here at St Bryce-Dale's Church, and he taught young Gordon how to drive in his Ford Pop with its 10 horsepower, 3 gears and pop-out air vents. Off-road. His dad's teachings were in moral compassion and in social responsibility. Lessons from a man of the cloth in helping those least able, now famously known as Gordon Brown's moral compass. At school, the young Gordon was a clever, sporty child. As part of a local experiment, he was fast-tracked through the education system, along with other bright kids, so he finished high school aged 16. It was at high school that Gordon Brown suffered an injury that many say changed him psychologically. He was playing rugby in a staff versus pupils match when he took a knock on the head. That led to a detached retina. He lost the sight in one eye, and he almost lost it in the other eye. It took lengthy periods of pioneering surgery and of lying down in the dark. People who knew him say that nearly losing his sight gave Gordon Brown a new urgency to achieve, to get things done. At the age of 16, Gordon Brown crossed the River Forth for Edinburgh University to study history. And as a student, he soon tasted political success. This was Gordon Brown's entry into politics. The student politician with the flowing locks who became university rector. It was a big deal at the time. And an even bigger deal when he took on senior academics and officials for the right to chair the university court, and won. The university establishment loathed it, the notion that one of this lot, a mere student, could hold a key position on its governing body. Little wonder that the young Gordon Brown was soon being courted by the great and the good in the Labour Party. One day, son, it'll all be yours. Thereafter, for Gordon Brown, there were jobs lecturing in politics at university, researching and producing as a journalist at Scottish television. And it was in 1983 that he finally took the turning for Westminster, becoming the MP for Dunfermline East. And the rest is political history. James Matthews, Sky News, on Gordon Brown's old stomping ground.
Well, we'll stay with the subject of Gordon Brown's hinterland. We've been joined now here at Westminster as the helicopters buzz overhead by Gordon Brown's biographer, Tom Bauer. Good to see you. And a momentous day. I mean, you studied in such minute detail the background of this man. How does it fit into the overall picture?
Well, I think it's a remorseless ambition, and finally it's materialized. I mean, whether he would have imagined 10 or even a year ago that he'd be here on this day, I have my doubts, but he's finally executed a coup, he's executed a remorseless destruction of all his rivals. He's got where he wanted to be 30 years ago, which is an astonishing achievement.
Well, remorseless destruction gives us a little indication of the sort of picture that you often paint of this man in the biography.
Well, I don't think you get to the top unless you're pretty ruthless. The trouble is for him that whereas Tony Blair could hide his ruthlessness under a terrific performance, Brown so often does seem exactly what he is, and so to that extent he is what you see.
Is he a psychologically flawed character in this post, do you think?
I think he is flawed. I mean, he has not been, he has found life very difficult. I think the fact that he married so late and hasn't got a family, and that he spent so much time on politics and aroused such antagonism that he's even accused by a mild civil servant of being a Stalinist, is exactly his flaws. But every politician has his flaws, and some of the greatest statesmen have. And now we've got to see whether he can suppress the flaws and become an excellent Prime Minister.
Do you think he's capable of doing that? I mean, some of the moments of real fury that you paint a picture of in your book, paint a picture of a man who can lose it and can be quite physical about it too.
I think that was always frustration. I mean, now he can't be frustrated by ambition anymore. He's there. He can only be frustrated by not getting his own way. If he doesn't get his own way, that's his own problem. Therefore, he's a failure. So I think we'll see an end to that sort of, to the temper tantrums of the people in his way. Whether he'll be able to do other things which are equally, or probably more important, which is to delegate, to have, to consider many things at the same time. He's always been very monofocused, always thought of one thing at a time, couldn't look at the wider picture. Whether he's got the courage and the compassion to push through ideas, all those, really, these are qualities of leadership which he hasn't had to display until now. And that's what's going to count, whether he can actually see the bigger picture, which until now he hasn't been able to.
And I suppose that's what will be so fascinating when we see what sort of cabinet he presents. And it was interesting, this move that seemed to come out of the blue, that his approach to Lord Ashdown, for example, as a potential Northern Ireland secretary. I mean, that gave us an insight into the mind of a man that we were perhaps surprised by.
Oh, no, that was pure strategy to destroy
really?
the Liberals.
What's your take? What was your
I
take
think
on
that was just very clever. Absolutely. I mean, the point about Gordon Brown is he's a machine politician. Scottish Socialists, the Scottish Labour Party, they're brilliant. He's been fighting these campaigns since the age of 16, 17 in Scotland. He knows how to destroy the opposition, and for him, the Liberals are a greater opposition in the north than the Tories. So that was very clever. But the thing about Gordon Brown is he gets hold of a word and never lets it go. So for years we had prudent, he suffocated that to death. Then it was inclusive. Now it's change. And you really think that he's suddenly come into government. He's been there for 10 years and suddenly everything has changed. So, you know, he's a man who, he gets an idea and he hammers and hammers and hammers. The Liberal thing was a wonderful diversion. He's blessed by the defection of the Tory yesterday. And now he's got to get down to the hard graft.
There have been occasions, and you noted this too, when a really big moment comes for Gordon Brown, he can quite often have a little crisis, can't he? Even when he was deciding whether to become an MP or not, that was surrounded by a moment of caution and a moment of worry. And it happened again, of course, when the decision to let Tony Blair go ahead and be leader of the Labour Party. On crunch moments, he's a fascinating character, really, isn't he?
Well, yes, he's a man who lacks courage in his history. There have been times where he didn't want to plunge the knife, often against Tony Blair, and perhaps the way he treated Harriet Harman shows that he now has got the courage. I mean, the truth is that he's now going to prove all those weaknesses can be overcome. They won't be able to. You can't suppress your personality and character when you're 56. But on the other hand, he's a man who, to get this far, to actually destroy Charles Clarke and Milburn and all the rest, has shown a ruthlessness and also a strategy. But the real key for him will be whether he can somehow shed the last 10 years, pretend that he hasn't been responsible for a lot of real problems, and really create a whole new era. That'll be the real challenge. And of course the cabinet, will it be inclusive or will it be all his cronies at the top? I think the latter. Alistair Darling, Ed Balls, all the people who are loyal to him will be in the inner cabinet, and we'll see business as usual.
A lot of people, though, will, especially on a day like today, contemplate the sort of wider picture around Gordon Brown vis-à-vis his family. Now, this is a man who's been through extraordinary personal tragedy in the last few years, and then has been blessed with his two sons, of course, has the wife alongside him that many through his political career wondered whether he would ever have. I mean, things have shifted for him significantly on those bases.
Absolutely enormously. If you look at Gordon Brown 10 years ago, when he was hiding his girlfriends, had no family, was married to Westminster.
He once went out with a princess as well.
Well, he went out with a princess. He went out with a lot of girls. I mean, he was a very, very attractive man, and a lot of women liked him, and they were frustrated by his treatment of them, which was pretty poor. But, you know, the change has come, and he's had, as you say, a lot of tragedy with the children, but a lot of pleasure too, and he's been able to overcome it. I think partly because of his faith in religion, his faith in his idealism, and his inner strength. He has a great character, undoubtedly, a great sportsman, and those are really the qualities which you need as a leader. Now, you know, what's interesting is that today, that none of us, even me who's really studied the man, can actually say how the Brown government will transpose, how it'll actually run out, because there's so much hidden about the man. He's concealed so much about himself. All those around him are pledged and sworn an oath of secrecy, not to reveal the real man. But he will now be exposed. It's 24/7 for him. So we'll see whether the strength actually results in a great leadership and a great prime ministership, or whether it just fizzles into lots of disasters.
Yeah, I'm sure he'd have plenty of answers if he was standing here too. But Tom Bauer, great to talk to you on this extraordinary day. Thank you indeed for joining us here at Westminster. And as we were just chatting about there, the influence perhaps or otherwise of the new incoming Prime Minister's wife will be raising a lot of questions, of course. It's well known behind every good man there is usually a good woman. So what do we know about Sarah Brown? Sarah Hughes has been taking a look.
How do you like being the Prime Minister's wife, Sarah?
She's been the First Lady in waiting for long enough. Sarah Brown's time has come. But is she prepared for her new life at number 10? Novelist Kathy Lett has been friends with Sarah for 18 years.
Sarah's ready. Yeah, she's had enough time to prepare. She's very down to earth. She's passionately political, but not in a pushy way. She will make an impact, and the country will like her. They'll respect her. She's very dignified, but she does have a quite wicked and mischievous sense of humour, which will come out more, I hope, because she can be a party girl, not just a political party girl. We might get her dancing on the odd tabletop.
She was born Sarah Macaulay in Buckinghamshire in 1963 and spent her early childhood in Tanzania. When she was 7, her parents split up, and Sarah moved to North London with her mother. She was educated here at Ackland Burley Comprehensive and later Camden High School for Girls. Academically, she shone, and her career in PR was equally high-flying. She founded a consultancy with her friend Julia Hobsbawm, and her job led her into Gordon Brown's life. They married in Scotland in 2000, and Sarah gave up work when she learned she was expecting their first child. But then came tragedy, with the loss of their daughter Jennifer Jane when she was just 10 days old. Sarah now concentrates on Project Brown, supporting her husband and raising their 2 young children, John, who's now 3, and 11-month-old Fraser, who has cystic fibrosis. She also works tirelessly for charity. But the relative privacy Sarah has enjoyed is a thing of the past. Being the Prime Minister's wife is a privileged role, but there are pitfalls, as the gaffe-prone Cherie Blair soon discovered. In 2002, she was forced to apologise for remarks about Palestinian suicide bombers.
I would agree with that, as long as young people feel they've got no hope but to blow themselves up. We're never going to make progress, are we?
Next came the Bristol Flats scandal. When it emerged, convicted fraudster Peter Foster had helped Mrs. Blair with a property deal.
I know I am in a very special position. I'm the wife of the Prime Minister. I have an interesting job and a wonderful family. But I also know I am not Superwoman.
And then this cringe-making rendition of a Beatles classic.
Will you
what happened to Cherie and will have learnt things from it. And I think the public interest was unprecedented, and I think that will continue, but I think people have got much smarter in working out how to deal with it, and I think that's a good thing, because it can be very, very difficult to deal with that intense media interest in very personal aspects of your life.
Friends say Sarah Brown is likely to be a quieter and more traditional consort than Cherie. And the years living next door to the Blairs will have taught her a lot. There's one lesson in particular she'd be wise to heed. Never answer the doorbell in your nightdress. Sarah Hughes, Sky News.
Never a good idea, really, is it? Sense of anticipation building now here at Westminster. We're just a few moments away from Tony Blair's last Prime Minister's questions. Let's get you the live shot from our camera position at the Treasury. We're watching and waiting there to see any...
General election in June! General election!
Somebody there with perhaps a sense of forecasting that we haven't necessarily got. But anyway, forgive us for that interruption there. This then our image at the Treasury. We're just waiting for Gordon Brown to emerge from there. And this then the live camera position at the Commons. And a few moments ago, a few MPs were to be seen up and down these streets and pavements around us, but they've now deserted us and all gone to file in for their piece of history, I suppose, as Tony Blair makes his exit. And it'll be fascinating to see what questions are put to Tony Blair. So more of that to come, and a calmer scene perhaps here on Abingdon Green too. So then the scene in the Commons, we'll be back there very shortly. Don't go away.
In a land of make-believe, you've got to have faith.
The Hogfather is unavailable.
Or it all starts falling to pieces.
So for the sun to come up tomorrow morning, the Hogfather has to be alive.
Precisamente.
What if he's dead?
Starring David Jason and an all-star cast. Terry Pratchett's BAFTA award-winning Hogfather. Wednesday at 9, Sky 1 and Sky 1 HD.
Are you one of the millions of people who think they can't learn a new language? Well, thanks to our software called Rosetta Stone, learning a new language is incredibly easy and fast. Try it for yourself with this amazing, free, interactive demo CD.
It's the fastest way, I think, that you can learn particularly a language, which can be sometimes difficult.
Start speaking from day one. You'll follow real-life images and hear native speakers.
El caballo está saltando.
This powerful combination teaches you to think in a new language, not memorize, helping you learn quickly and easily.
It's well constructed and it's fun to do.
Rosetta Stone is so fast and effective that we offer an extraordinary unconditional 6-month money-back guarantee.
You get a money-back guarantee with Rosetta Stone. What have you to lose?
Call 0800 2800 937 or text CD to 80082 to receive your free demo CD. And see for yourself why Rosetta Stone is the fast way to learn a new language. Guaranteed.
Looking for a home? Visit primelocation.com. No other website has all the properties from the country's leading estate agents. Everything. Townhouses, country houses, flats, new homes and properties abroad. So if you're looking to buy or rent, visit primelocation.com. And if you're selling or letting, make sure you choose a Prime Location agent. primelocation.com. Don't move home without it.
Thinking about a change of career? The Instructor College needs people just like you to train as driving instructors.
I did. Now I'm earning £30,000.
You don't even have to give up work to do the training, which is great.
And at the end of it, you get a guaranteed placement in a driving school.
Working the hours you choose.
All you need is a driving licence to start. So call the Instructor College free on 0500 17 0017 and get your £30,000 career on the road.
The new Jeep Patriot. Compact and agile, it's a two-wheel drive that becomes a four-wheel drive the moment the going gets tough. The 2-liter diesel engine delivers 42.2 miles per gallon on a combined cycle. Patriot starts from just 15,995 pounds. The new Jeep Patriot. It figures.
You're watching Sky News Today, live from Westminster. Just a few minutes to go before Tony Blair's last session at Prime Minister's Questions. We saw him leaving Downing Street just over half an hour ago, standing by there for us live and watching events unfold here on this remarkable day. Our political editor, Adam Bolton. And Adam, you've been watching Tony Blair at close quarters for the last 10 years, and this is a historic day.
Yes, it is. I think it's a very big day for Mr. Blair, obviously, because he has shown, frankly, through a large number of Tory leaders since he took over, that he can be the master of Question Time, the master of the Commons. To a certain extent, Question Time is stacked in his favour. And remember, too, that he changed the rules. Until Tony Blair, there used to be 2 Question Times a week of 15 minutes on Tuesdays and Thursdays. He changed it to 1 of half an hour's duration and then moved that to before lunch rather than after lunch. So he's had an impact, really, on the whole panoply of the event. And although just about every opposition leader and Prime Minister will tell you that they hate Question Time, there is no doubt at all that in Britain and around the world it is regarded as absolutely the top event, frankly, of parliamentary politics. So no danger that it will go away. I hear that Gordon Brown considered expanding Question Time to an hour's duration, but has decided that that might just be testing some of our concentrations, shall we put it that way, a little too much.
We were just looking at some images from earlier when he arrived at the Treasury. Adam, he'll be departing there very shortly too, and we're keeping our eyes across that also. But it'll be interesting to see how the Conservatives and the other parties play this today, because really it is an occasion for Tony Blair to mark his last day in office, but they have to balance it with what comes next.
Yes, indeed. I suspect that David Cameron will reserve the velvet glove for Tony Blair and the fist inside for Gordon Brown, if he possibly can do that with some delicacy. And it has to be said that David Cameron has shown himself to be a pretty subtle performer at Prime Minister's Questions since he took over. Min Campbell is expected to raise the question of Iraq. Of course, opposition to the Iraq adventure is, as the Liberal Democrats see it, the unique selling point of the party as far as mainstream politics is concerned. So Min Campbell, an expert on foreign affairs, can be expected to bang that drum. I think it will be quite a test for him whether he hits the right tone with that question. Certainly Labour MPs, I suspect, will be in the mood to jump on Min Campbell, and there's not much love for him either on the Tory benches. The other thing, of course, to look out for will be backbenchers who will be invited to comment on Tony Blair's decade. I'm not a betting man, but I would venture a guess that the senior jester of the House, Dennis Skinner, may be allowed a final outing, just as he was with Margaret Thatcher. Well, you know, we'll have to see, but I suspect the Speaker will rise to the occasion and want to call other big names as well as the Prime Minister himself and, of course, the leaders of the opposition parties.
And 2 big names departing the scene on this day too, of course, Adam. We shouldn't forget, we've got the Home Secretary outgoing too and the Deputy Prime Minister.
That's right. Last week, in fact, was the final Deputy Prime Minister's Questions, where John Prescott thoroughly enjoyed his outing up against William Hague. Although he too, of course, reserved a few barbs for the people he refers to generally as the scribblers. That's you and me, Julie, that's the media. And John Reid is going as well as Home Secretary. Now, this is a voluntary decision by him to step down, although it's no secret that he and the Chancellor have had one of those Scottish grudge matches between each other, stretching back decades into the mists of local politics. But it has to be said, I've talked to a number of people close to Gordon Brown, and they really have said, well, you know, John Reid did the right thing. He really gave Gordon Brown a tremendous present by opening up one of the top posts of government, the Home Secretaryship, to a fresh appointment. So John Reid has gone out with pats on the back, if you like, from the Brownites, rather than sticking around possibly to be a thorn in the flesh of the Chancellor. And one of the things we'll be looking out for when we get the reshuffle, and I think we will get the bulk of it tomorrow certainly, is not only who's going to be Home Secretary, but will other previous critics of Gordon Brown make a comeback in government. I think Charles Clarke, for example, who resigned as Home Secretary, he may be a possibility to make a comeback. Certainly he and Gordon Brown have had talks about their relationship in recent weeks. So that will be another possible return, as well as all the fresh young faces we're doubtless going to see.
OK, Adam, thank you very much indeed for that. More from you to come throughout the day, of course. Coming up next here on Sky News Today, Tony Blair's last Prime Minister's questions.
For 18 years, 18 long years, my party has been in opposition. It could only say it could not do. Today, we are charged with the deep responsibility of government. We ran for office as New Labour. We will govern as New Labour. Education, education, and education.
A day like today, I mean, it's not a day for sort of sound bites, really, but I feel the hand of history upon our shoulder.
She was the people's princess. And that's how she will stay, how she will remain in our hearts and in our memories forever. This mass terrorism is the new evil in our world today.
We don't want your bloody war!
He has existing and active military plans for the use of chemical and biological weapons, which could be activated within 45 minutes. Our determination to defend our values and our way of life is greater than their determination to cause death and destruction to innocent people. The rules of the game are changing. We have done more than any other government before us to put this green agenda right at the centre of government policy. People probably think Prime Minister shouldn't go on holiday at all, but I would frankly be reluctant to give up my holidays abroad. I may have been wrong. That's your call. But believe one thing, if nothing else. I did what I thought was right for our country. You're the future now, so make the most of it.
Hello everybody, a very good morning to you. It's just before noon on Lunchtime Live, and we're outside Buckingham Palace today on the day that Gordon Brown finally takes office. We're standing by for a very special Prime Minister's Questions. It's Tony Blair's last appearance at that dispatch box. Immediately afterwards, the Prime Minister will return to Downing Street. After saying farewell to his staff, he'll close the door on number 10 for the very last time. Then he'll be driven here to the palace, where he'll see the Queen and resign.
Well, we're live at Westminster throughout the programme as this day of history and drama unfolds. You won't miss a moment as the Skycopter tracks the outgoing and the incoming Prime Minister's journeys to and from the palace. And we're live at the Treasury as Gordon Brown gets ready for a long-awaited royal appointment.
Well, that's to come, but first it's time for Tony Blair's final public engagement. Prime Minister's Questions. Our political editor, Adam Bolton, is listening in from Downing Street. What do you think it might involve today, Adam? Lots of plaudits?
Yes, I think so. I think it will be what they tend to call a great parliamentary occasion, which sometimes to onlookers looks like a surfeit of backslapping. But as we've heard from the Conservatives, they are prepared to give credit where credit is due, to recognise a remarkable, successful career as a politician, winning 3 general elections, ruling the country for 10 years, and doing many things, of course, which David Cameron now supports, even although he voted against them as a member of the opposition, and that may possibly become a little bit of a discussion, I think, between the Prime Minister and the current leader of the opposition. Of course, Mr. Blair, in his time, has seen off. He's just come into the House of Commons there, taking his seat next to Gordon Brown. I was saying in his time, Mr. Blair has seen off John Major, William Hague, Ian Duncan Smith, Michael Howard, and now, of course, is working on David Cameron, although that final task of dealing with that will fall to Gordon Brown, and one or other of them is likely to emerge the victor, with the other one going to the back benches. But quite remarkable, really, what's gone on. Not only are we getting the change of prime ministers, but remember, at the next general election, all 3 of the major figures vying to be Prime Minister will be new faces, people who have never fought a general election before. So it's going to be an open election in this country, and coincidentally, of course, it's going to be an open election in the United States. So I think, you know, we are seeing the end of a period in political history and a new period opening up, really, on both sides of the Atlantic.
Presumably he'll be listing his engagements, will he?
He will be listing his engagements. Let's go over now to question time.
David Burrows. Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, sir, first of all, I know the whole House will want to join with me in sending our deep condolences to the family and friends of Major Paul Harding of the 1st Battalion, the Rifles,